Captain Camcar is going to be here to partake in that discussion with us. 8:15 commission comments and wrapping up at 8:30. Theoretical.
Great. Theoretical. We are differentiating between item number 5, which is the bias-based policy, and item number 9, the data collection system, because one deals with what the proposed policy is in the police department. Other bias-based scoping is going to cover the scope of what we expect and what the community expects of bias-based policing. So that's our time to really get into the, I guess you would say the minutia of what you would like to see. Okay, so we'll start with public comments, and I'll turn it over to Tamara.
Hi. I have 2 speakers signed up. First, Carol Burr-Caldwell, and then Majeska C. Screen. We'll have 3 minutes. When you have 20 seconds remaining, I'll hold up the sign. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Nate, for calling it normal public comment. I'm sure
Oh, thank you.
You messed that word. These are copies. And I also will pass these around because I have copies of this in my packet for y'all, but you might want a clean copy. Okay, ready to start. Carol Berg, Caldwell, 2510 Augusta. Greetings, commissioners. On August 1st, EPD's Fix-It Ticket Vehicle Compliance Program was implemented. In July, I told this police commission how wonderful, smart, community values-oriented it was for EPD to implement this. My appreciation for EPD and Officer Greg Magnus is not one whit lessened by my following concerns. For Officer Magnus's idea to expand the list of violations was and is a great suggestion. I'm asking the Police Commission, however, to review this expanded program and recommend to Chief Kearns a step. Turns out, ever since the August 1st effective date, there have been numerous times people were cited for fix-it ticket violations, but didn't allegedly receive the brochure from the citing officer. A brochure that would have informed them the violation would be expunged, no fine, if they corrected the violation, had an officer confirm correction made, paid the $50 admin fee, far less than the potential fine. So I started to contact EPD, specifically Captain Carl Durr, who had asked me to keep him posted on how matters rolled out in court. I kept seeing people in court getting the full fines imposed, finding out they'd not been told about the vehicle compliance program or given brochure allegedly. Sometimes judges recognized the violation was on the list, and judges would then offer more time. Eventually, after several contacts and letters to either Captain Durr or meetings, conversations with Ms. Hawley recently told me that while it was an expectation that police provide the brochure, it was not a requirement. Please review the attached RG August 1st article, which states police will provide informational brochure along with a citation. Local news stations also aired news of this great fix-it ticket program. Ms. Hawley also informed me that it was an exception to the rule when officer errors occurred, errors in not providing the brochure to the motorists. There have been numerous such exceptions to the rule. Yesterday, 3 young men, individual matters, received full fines levied. We checked their tickets. All violations were indeed included in the expanded list. See your copy of the brochure for that list. This is no critique of police who, because this is still a relatively new program, who may be forgetting that they cited a violation that is included in the vehicle compliance program. Changes can be challenging to adopt or remember. However, I do ask you to recommend to Chief Kearns a policy which will require that the brochure be provided to anyone and everyone cited for violations contained in the brochure. I ask this not for punitive or disciplinary purposes, though I recognize there is that possibility, but from a strong belief that an actual policy requirement will prompt better police compliance with this compliance program. I have seen so many court clients who have appreciated this fix-it ticket program, but I have also seen many court clients perplexed and upset that they weren't given equal opportunity for this more affordable, expeditious way to resolve a violation. Also, you'll see some more information if you choose to take this up. You might want to study that Register Guard article that did say that people could flag down any police who might be available, because the hours are limited, noon to 6, Monday through Friday. Some people actually have jobs and other obligations. It might be problematic for them to go back to apparently a new system of having to come here. Thank you for studying this. I look forward to your work on this.
Thank you. Next, we have Majeska C. Screen.
Majestic C-Screen. I want to thank Carol for her work on this and some of the other things that she gets involved in as a result of what she sees as an independent court observer. I want to make 3 comments that have to do with homeless issues. Except, gosh, now I've forgotten my first one. Well, let me go to my second one. So just today, well, there's been a person camping on the street outside of my house, and just in the last few days, neighbors have started calling to say it's time for this person to get moved on. And I spoke to a neighbor this afternoon who said that the police have been by about 3 times, and one of the officers suggested to the neighbor that he go mess with the guy's stuff, that maybe that'll make him leave sooner. And actually, the guy's stuff has been messed with, and it's already started at least one altercation out there. I don't think that's appropriate for police to be encouraging people to mess with homeless people's stuff. Gosh, maybe I'll think of the first thing too late. But the third thing I wanted to say was I would like, I was hoping that some of the city councilors would be here, but maybe Chief Kearns could be asked. I know I can't really ask a question and expect an answer, although the chief might give one, but maybe one of you can ask the question for me. I think we need to hear some sort of an update on what's going on with what the city council asked the city manager to have staff look into setting up some sort of a networking matching program for homeless who have a need for place and others who have space to offer. Council passed that in July. There was a little report back by staff in September to the council with an AIS, an agenda item summary, that was not very specific, and it mentioned some sort of interdepartmental task team, but it didn't seem, I don't think the police department was listed as being involved in that task team. And I think safety issues for all concerned is going to be a humongous issue with that program. And setting up something like that is something I've actually been thinking about for about 3 years. So I told the city manager that, and I'd like for staff to talk with me about it. At this point, I can't even figure out who to try to talk to about it. But if they don't even have the police involved in developing the plan and the program for that, then that sounds to me like they're not thinking as much as they need to about some of the community policing and safety-related issues for all concerned in that program. Not only for the people who might in some way invite homeless people to their property, but also the safety issues for the homeless people, and also for neighbors who might be upset or concerned or think that things are going on. And now I remembered the first thing that I wanted to say, which has to do with your agenda, the bias-based policing collection system, scoping. I hope that is set up in such a way that it captures information about socioeconomic status or homeless issues or something like that, because that's something that we as a community need to have better tools for tracking. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our public forum. I'd like to turn the time back over to Bob.
Thank you. So we're at a point now on the agenda where we're going to be doing commissioner comments. And anybody who wants to start off, get going. If not, we'll start on this side of the table and work around. Anybody volunteering? No? All right. Juan Carlos, you want to go first?
If you can come back to me last, that'll be great, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
There you go, I'll go first.
Right ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, keep democracy in action going.
Okay.
First of all, I'd like to say welcome to the new commissioner. You know, great to have you on board. Hope that, I know that you've been here a number of times and stuff, and I hope that, I know that you'll be able to do some great contributions, especially in the area of the commission that we talk about public relationship and building relationships between EPD and the citizens of Eugene. That's pretty much, I'd like to thank the guests that came out and testified as usual. Nice to see you, nice to see everyone. And that's just about all I have at this time. I'll pass it off to my good friend Jim.
I'll be actually brief tonight. Welcome, Bill, your first meeting tonight, and Edward, welcome back for your second one, and good to see everybody again. Thanks.
Ditto for Bill and Edward. Notes from the CRB. One is, and this is to Pete, is I understand when you were a captain, they had some ethics training that has gone away, and we thought that would be a good possibility to continue the program. You got some high rates on that. And one other has to do with the training issue, and there was probably a misjudgment of an intoxicated young female who was given the choice of whether to be taken home or to the Buckley House, and chose to take it home. And in this situation, if somebody is visibly intoxicated, it would be difficult to be able to have them give consent to anywhere where they could to incur danger. And I'm wondering if there's any kind of policy or if it's a possibility to set up that as a policy, because as one person pointed out, when somebody is intoxicated, it's difficult for them to consent to anything. So that's the notes from the CRB. Thank you.
All right. First, I'd echo Majeska's question about the city council moving forward, Chief, on the trying to connect people. I'm not even sure exactly what the motion was, but it seemed like it was Mayor Clark, or Councilor Clark's hope that the city would be like a clearinghouse of information for where people might be able to stay if the department has been involved in that. I did a ride-along at the 911 center a couple of Fridays ago. It was from, I think, 7 to 11 o'clock at night on a Friday. It was a lot of fun. I sat in with Liz. Chris was the supervisor. They made me feel welcome. It was I'd never been in there before. Really fun environment. I'd done ride-alongs in patrol cars before. That 911 center was something else. The place was such a team. At one point, there was I don't remember what the code was, but there was a kind of a big response that required a lot of officers for something that involved a guy with a firearm. And it was just amazing. I'd been in there about 5 minutes when this happened. They said usually when a rider is in there, nothing happens. But the whole place just kind of went into action. Liz, who I was sitting with, kind of took control of the whole room. Everyone's responding, giving information to her. When the whole thing was done, she told me she hadn't even been doing it that long. I was amazed at how well she was trained and able to handle it. It was just a lot of fun. The team really worked together well. And yeah, it was a great place to do a ride-along.
I have not been successful in scheduling a ride-along yet, but I have been, I did have the opportunity to go to Carter, the church where Carter pastors, and help serve breakfast to the homeless. Jesse was there as well, which was a great experience for me, and I hope to do that again. Amongst other things in my life, that's what's been going on. Thanks.
Thank you, Cameron. We have had a great response to what I understand to be anyway a great response to our forums on homeless people, and the fact that we were as a commission concerned about laws that protect and also affect homeless people. So I think we're representing what we're supposed to do as a commission in the community, and I'm real proud of everybody who participated. I'd like to welcome William to our commission. He is here tonight to represent his particular area of the city, and we thank you for your contributions in the past, which are many. I don't know if the commissioners remember that you came and spoke to us about Kids First last year. So we know how involved you are in the community, and we appreciate that. For my part, I did take a ride along last week, as a matter of fact, with Officer and Tim Hunt. He was a very nice young man, and we had a nice conversation and saw a lot going on, and I saw a lot of discretion and good police work, and there was one good aspect of it that I really liked is that even though he's a brand new guy, hence his being assigned to me as the ride along, so there was collaboration with older, more veteran officers on a couple of calls, and he expressed his appreciation to have them as part of the team that they work on together so that they can resolve issues. And they handled a very kind of unstable mental subject very well. Made him feel at ease. They got cahoots there. They got him the treatment and help he needed. So I'm really pleased with what I saw. Thank you. Juan Carlos?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was kind of looking at whether I was going to give up on this year or next year having a policy on bias policing. And sure enough, it's here. I am glad that work is going to begin shortly. I appreciate that there's different policies being presented to us for us to look at. As we began our conversation on this topic at the very end of the day, I wonder whether any discussions or any perspectives will be different if in fact the representation at this table will be different. So that what if all the people at this table were ethnic minorities and only 2 were white? I am looking forward to see the priorities being set by the police commission and not by any other entities. I would like to see how, in which order we are going to be looking at policies or initiatives. I also encourage all of you to do ride-alongs at the municipal court. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Carlos?
I just want to thank our 2 speakers tonight for their comments, and also thank everybody for their warm welcome. I'm excited to be here, and I hope I will bring some helpful comments to the table. Thank you.
So, welcome to our 2 new members. And I don't have a whole lot else to add.
I'll take that. It's nice to see somebody who's even more of a newbie than I. I want to thank the chief for taking time to meet with me a couple of weeks ago and just kind of get acquainted and work on our collegiality. By a coincidence, I actually had a interaction with Officer Hunt as well. In our neighborhood, one of our neighbors came to me and said, not even knowing I'm on the commission, "You know people in City Hall, what do we do about this guy throwing firecrackers at people walking by on the sidewalk?" I said, "Well, you could go talk to him." I did. He threw firecrackers at me. Okay, well, let's call the police, see if they'll go talk to him, just explain what's what. And I actually sent a commendation through Melinda McLaughlin for Officer Hunt's behavior there. If he was a newbie, it didn't show, and that was very pleasing. From the Human Rights Commission, the only news is we're still researching other states' bills of rights and bills of rights and responsibilities for the homeless. And I'm still finding, as I talk to people in other states, that the overriding problem is who pays for anything like that? Who enforces it? Where's the money come from for enforcement? And so on. So I'm not sure what the answer is to that, but I think there are people on that commission who are still hoping that something will move forward, even if only symbolically.
Thank you, Emily. Okay, we move on to the next section, which is the videotaping policy, and we finally have some finality on this, I hope. The city attorney has reviewed it at request of the commission and has comments. And I guess, Matt, can you take over?
Yeah, briefly, I'll do my best.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice to meet a lot of you. I'm Matt Lowen. Where we're at with this is I've included we have a, you may or may not know, we have a general order format that currently exists inside of our POM, our Police Operations Manual, and my job is basically we're updating this to a policy manual. The language will look different, the formatting will look different, and we'll have a more routinized schedule of reviewing policies for currency. What I have here in this, I missed the discussion last week, or last month rather, I'm sorry. Lieutenant Klinko and somebody else was here to facilitate the discussion. So I'm a little bit unprepared as to understanding what the discussion was. But what you have here is basically through a review, the city attorney, Mr. Ben Miller, who works for the city attorney's office, has reviewed this. Basically, a lot of this comes down to there are Oregon administrative rules that govern what and how long we retain certain things, video images, audio images. And the other caveat to that is that we're also trying to develop a policy that deals with all media storage, not just retention of videotapes we generate at public demonstrations and things like that. So a couple of takeaways that are high points that I think you'll be interested in is that there is a sort of a schedule for retention on videotapes where we're when those are basically being separated or no longer maintaining records, and it's on the second page there. It's some of the edits by the city attorney are underlined or struck. You can look at those, and what we'll also be trying to frame into this is just encouraging when this policy won't be geared so much to the retention of the media as to when and why we'll use it. And I'll try to work into here basically some good general practices about what we're doing is we're recording officers at a scene. We're not, philosophically, we're not capturing people who are at a public demonstration. We're videotaping the officers who are there, so there's not kind of a feel like we're overtly just randomly videotaping people who may not want to or consent to. This will take on a new look in terms of its formatting, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I hope I haven't just danced around issues here for you guys, but I have a tendency to yammer. So if you have any specific questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer those for you, or any follow-up you might want to see. I'll run that down.
Okay, we'll go around the board. I have Tamara on the queue first because she gave me the list with her name at the top.
Okay, so I assume since you're talking about other types of media, that the term videotaping will be changed throughout the policy? Because that refers to one specific type of media?
Yes. We have a software system called MediaSolve, and it basically is what we have that, it's the software system right now that runs our, downstairs, if you've ever done a tour of the headquarters, it runs the DUI processing room software, the area where we do in-person lineups. It is also a video system that can manage all kinds of other digital media, like our evidence photographs, any kind of digital image, audio image, and I'm working with the supervisor at our property control unit to try and look at a policy that deals with how long we manage and retain those things. I think this policy, philosophically, this policy will look more like when we're publicly videotaping people. So it actually we may retain video and audio taping or something like that. May still remain in the because there may be two separate policies that govern retention of the material and when we're videotaping people in public, where they feel like they may not want to be videotaped.
If I could just step in there, it looks like Mr. Miller got a copy of this in between when we struck number 3 there and that, because you brought that issue up before.
I did.
And all the videotapings were changed to video recording or recordings. So we just need to merge those two, so we'll make sure that happens.
My second question was on section B3A1, where it talks about person submitting videotape should complete a pre-formatted gun label. This seems to allude to members of the public submitting recordings. And I just was wondering if that is in fact the case as it appears to be here. How, later on in this policy in section B7, it talks about videotapes not being edited or altered in any manner. That, I assume, applies to when their police department audio or video recordings, but how can you be sure when you're taking in video or audio recordings from members of the public, they have not been edited and altered, and yet they're treated in the same manner, perhaps as evidence or retained for other purposes? Is there a way to tell if they've been edited or altered by the department?
Well, I'm sure there is. I probably am not the person to specifically say how or why they would know that, although that is a very valid point. Let me run that down
Okay.
from Jason Peterson.
Okay, I just wanted to raise that point.
I think the word person should be changed to employees.
Okay.
This is all about submitting video evidence.
Okay, as department recorded audio and video recordings, okay. I was just unclear on that part. It seemed to be talking about items that might have been turned in by members of the public. That's why I wasn't sure. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have Edward, and Jesse, and Jim.
Fine, okay. Actually, we've dealt with two of my questions. One was, where's all the process that leads to these people submitting videotapes? And I gathered that's just terminology. And of course, video recording, there's so many media that you can record on now, besides tape, that obviously we don't want to limit the language. When this documentation is being done out in the field, what does the public see? Do they see someone in plain clothes, in a safety vest with a camera? Do they see an officer with a camera? What does the public see?
Historically, what I can tell you somebody would see would be a plainclothes person who would be identified through maybe a visible department badge or a specific unit T-shirt or a polo shirt that would have some kind of Eugene Police emblem on it. Our video response team are members of our burglary investigations unit. They also perform that function. And it's just kind of been that way since I've been at the department. And they would see somebody not in a kind of in your face or overt manner, but just from a distance, operating a video camera discreetly, but not to appear like they're spying or.
So not really anything to tell the casual observer that this is documenting officers, not, say, protesters or bystanders.
Yeah, I'm not sure what
I just had this notion that we need a big orange safety vest that says we're documenting what the cops are doing, not you. I don't know how to word that in 3 words or so, but it strikes me as that would just be good PR. And your comments?
Just to be, I should probably clarify, the purpose of videotaping isn't exclusively to document the actions of police. It's, I mean, it even says in the introduction that it's to document crimes and other events that occur that necessitate a police response.
So I guess I just want to be clear what we're taking pictures of and what the public would see when we're doing it.
Right.
Got it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, I have Jesse and Jim.
One of the reasons for retention longer than the normal period would be citizen complaints, according to the policy. Would a complaint to the police auditor trip that system?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, Jim?
Well, I'll piggyback a little bit on Jesse's comment. In 3A, it says it'll be retained for 30 days. Is 30 days enough time to retain the equipment for perhaps for somebody to make a complaint to the police auditor and have it follow through enough so that tape isn't accidentally destroyed before that complaint is able to make it through the system?
Without go ahead.
Or even any other crime to even know whether you may not even have noticed that a crime was committed, or somebody may, or on the flip side, it may exonerate somebody that may have said, hey, this person groped me while we were, while whatever was going on, and that tape would exonerate them saying, that didn't happen. But so is 30 days enough time for those issues to come up and for that tape to be able to be used to either exonerate or to prove valid?
Initially, as you mentioned, what came to my mind was a complaint based on a videotape. I don't remember your exact words, but I won't say the exact time frame because I don't know it, but I know that the auditor has to classify a complaint within a certain amount of time.
Well, I guess what I wasn't saying was that within 30 days of the complaint, but if the tape's only kept for 30 days, that complaint may not come up for 30, 60, may not even be a year before that complaint hits. So then the tape's gone, which may have been able to play a role in either proving yay or nay on a complaint to the auditor, or even on a potential crime that somebody comes up later and says, hey, like I said, just as an example, I was groped during this event that had police there that you were videotaping. Evidence is gone.
Right.
That could have exonerated or proven the claim to be true.
No, that's completely valid, and I think that 30 days that's simply a fallback to our general property where we don't have that's just a timeline where after 30 days, property is not retained if it's categorized as property, if it's not evidence in a crime or we know about it. I think that's just standard operating procedures at our evidence control unit, but that bears some looking at too, that timeline, why it's applied. And I don't have an answer for you right now, obviously, but that's something I'll
I believe that Chief Kearns would like to respond.
The in-car video system has a standard of 6 months, or a certain threshold in the following 6 months, a certain threshold of capacity in the storage unit. And then files are automatically purged if there's no enforcement action associated. The difference between the in-car video system and this policy is that there is a police action that necessitates the recording in the in-car video system. And I remember pretty well when this policy was developed and video recording by police in public places, demonstrations and meetings and that sort of thing was looked on with a great deal of suspicion and concern. Now everybody carries a video camera with them, and so it's just there's just a less of a heightened fear of the intrusion by police. So we can look at making this a 6-month period, but I can tell you now that the motivation for 30 days was to get rid of it as quickly as possible if there's no reason for police to possess video recording in their evidence locker. So in other words, something that looks like crime evidence that isn't. And the fear that police, like the FBI during the Watergate scandal, were investigating people that weren't committing crimes. At the time, people didn't want the Eugene Police Department to be collecting evidence on things that weren't crime, but were simply free speech opportunities.
I could see the 6 months just to match up with the in-car video.
Okay, we'll look at it.
Can I have another question about?
You still have the floor.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I had another question on, I guess it's section A, number 3, the new part that's put in pursuant to ORS 165.540, speaking to the limits where you have to make somebody aware as soon as possible that they're being recorded. How does that work for the in-car video and for the body cams? How is that informed to the person that's being stopped?
We make that notification right away. If I was a patrolman and I stopped your car, I would, just as kind of my routine, I would come up, I'd introduce myself, I'd say, hi, I'm Sergeant Lowell with the Eugene Police Department. State law requires I tell you our conversation's being recorded. And then I would go right in from that into the reason why I stopped you and things like that. So we're required to make that notification as soon as practical, and that's what we've trained the officers to do. So it happens. It should happen pretty quickly in the contact.
Okay. And just one other observation. It looked like you're changing the name to Evidence Control Unit from Property Control Unit.
That's correct. Okay. That's a recent.
There are some other places in here that the.
Yes, sir. Thank you kindly for that.
That was it.
Okay, I have one Carlos, then Joe, and Edward and Tim.
Yeah, some of my questions were already kind of covered. I was kind of curious about, you talked about the officers, whomever is assigned to do the videotaping. We're talking about, thank you, Chief, for clarifying that this is also applies to to public events and things like that. But you were saying that the officers will have some kind of, something that says they're from APD, is that right?
They should, generally. I don't know that there's anything requiring them to do that, but I can speak from my experience. I was formerly a burglary detective, and I was on the video response team, and we had these actually kind of silly hats that have the letters VRT on them. And we would wear, the few instances that I did actually go and video and audio record an event, I wore my Eugene Police Department Property Crimes polo t-shirt. So, and I had a gun and a badge visible on me. So I wasn't necessarily a uniformed policeman standing there, but I was somebody who, upon probably closer look, would probably be quickly identified as a police or maybe associated to.
It would seem to me that if your intent is to record such events or people or your officers in a way that you are undetected, then of course plainclothes or just limited visibility to identify yourself as an officer would be the way to go. But on the other hand, if you want to let people know that they're being recorded and they are on the open, that approach may not be the best one in my mind. I too was wondering about the 30 days. I think it would seem to be consistent to extend it to 6 months just to be consistent. Otherwise, you have officers, one that I talked to, and they have to check, is it 30, is it 60, is it 90? And things that is appropriate, maybe better to do it consistently in 6 months, given that it's not going to be a crime property. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have Joe, then Edward, and Tim.
Okay, yeah, I guess we've already looked at the 30-day thing, and the suggestion on the floor, I guess, at the moment is to keep it for 6 months, which I think is a major improvement. But one other question I have is how many cameras are we talking about that still are using tape? Is there any ideas or any sense of how many there are versus using the newer flash storage technology?
I would estimate that our equipment, we probably still have a good 10 or 12 old 8 millimeter, the small micro cassettes, and then about the same that have converted over to the little mini CDs discs. And I don't know how many of them we have that are actually removable.
So you're
storage.
actually using discs at this point?
That's the most current ones I've seen. I haven't seen if we have any that are moved to the removable storage.
Yeah, because the removable storage right now, you can pick those up for $200 a piece. And, you know, in other words, if you're talking about 16 cameras, that's $3,000. And it may, you know, the whole issue of tape goes away, and now you have a storage medium that allows you to copy things far faster than real time. Mm-hmm. And so for a $3,000 hit, you may find that that the use of tape and all the considerations that go into tape go away. And the other thing about maintaining this stuff is that the newer, on videotape itself, it's about 13 gigabytes per hour. MPEG-2, which is an older standard, goes to about 4, and the MPEG-4 stuff right now is about 1 gigabyte per hour. So at that point, a 2 terabyte drive is 2,000 hours, and you could archive this stuff forever for the cost of $75 on a 2 terabyte drive. So maybe that's a solution to this particular thing. It might be worth looking into. And
yeah, that's all part of the MediaSolve package and system that Sergeant Lowen referenced. It's headed down that road so that everything, our cameras will just even sync over Wi-Fi.
Okay.
That is one of the capacities that we're looking at.
So are these the cameras that are in the car, or are these the cameras that are handheld by people?
ICV is managed on entirely its own storage management system. It's from Coban Technologies. MediaSolve will manage everything except for our in-car video, and probably the officer-worn cameras are also Coban, so they would be managed by the ICV system as well.
Okay. And I guess one more question. So it's the cost of cameras, storage, inventory of tapes, and I guess the question there. The other one is the whole issue of the public recording the police as opposed to the police recording the public. Are there policies associated with that? I do understand that the Oregon state law is exactly equivalent in both directions, the requirements, and it's been a long time since I actually read the statute. I read it several years ago. But it's my understanding that the requirements are the same in both directions. Is there any thoughts on that?
Which requirement are you talking
In
about?
other words, you have to, I guess as the thing goes, if you are involved in the conversation, you don't have to announce that it's being recorded. But if you are not involved in the conversation, you must indicate that you are recording it.
No, if I'm standing here holding a video camera,
Right.
and you can see the little red light, even if I don't see the little red light, even as a police officer, now by policy, I'm gonna need to tell you.
Right.
But by law, I don't need to tell you, because I'm overtly
Exactly.
recording.
I understand that.
If I am recording you, whether I'm a police officer or a private citizen, in a place where there's expected privacy, so if you and I are sitting in a car, just as Joe and Nathan having a conversation, and I have a recorder in my pocket, and I don't tell you, that's unlawfully capturing communication.
Okay.
If we're standing in the middle of a busy street where we're having this conversation, and any of 40 people walking by could hear it, there is not that same expectation of privacy. So there's going to be an argument there that that wouldn't be an illegal capture of conversation. So there's more factors to it than just I'm recording and I have to tell you or I don't. 'Cause there's the expectation of privacy piece around it.
Okay, because I guess one of the things that makes me bring this up is that there have been a number of cases of the interaction between officers and people who are recording the officer, videotaping the officers. And I'm wondering if there are policies related to that in existence in the department, and if not, maybe we should be talking about something like that.
Yeah, that's all governed by state and federal law and what people's rights are. We don't have any policies that talk about what citizens can do.
Okay. Well, I'm more concerned about the reaction of the officers to the citizens doing it. And at that point, it does become a policy issue. Okay, that's my stuff. Thanks.
Edward?
Well, Joe, you just gave me more to talk about. I've only been in Eugene less than, 6 years now, but it seems to me when I first got here, I was seeing something in the Register Guard about a citizen who was recording police on the public street, and got their camera taken away, there was a case, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm curious to know what policy or procedure came out of that, so that we're not doing that again.
You want me to?
I quick answer. You don't have to go into deeply.
I think it's gotten to.
Yeah, first of all, Joe, you're right. There's been some stories around the country of police departments that have imposed rules on their officers because the officers are snatching cameras away from, because it's annoying to have somebody stick a camera in your face when you're trying to do something, and some officers have reacted badly. I see all of our complaints. I don't remember of an occasion where that's happened here in the last couple of years. So I understand your question, and I've made a note of it. There is a law in Oregon that Lieutenant Reynolds was referring to, and that this policy mentions that you can't record a conversation you're having with somebody unless both parties are aware that it's being recorded. And on occasion, when an officer has a contact with somebody, either a car stop or a person stop, we will be secretly recorded by the person that we contact. The story that you may have read about in the paper was one where a protester had done that with a couple of our police officers. And so one of the officers attempted to seize the video camera. And of course, both parties have, submitted different evidence in this case. So, there's some dispute about whether or not it was secretly happening. But in order to address your question, let's just assume that it was being recorded secretly. So there was some struggle over the camera and the arrest of the individual, and that's what led to that case. The question was, did the officers have the right to seize the camera? Did the officers have the right to search the camera? Did the officers use excessive force? During the time that lawsuit was being considered, I believe the Ninth Circuit. I believe the Ninth Circuit, but definitely enough courts in the Ninth Circuit that made rulings that When it comes to police stops and encounters in public places, the court is going to look pretty leniently at the public if they choose to secretly record those, particularly if the police officer is also recording it. So we have an in-car video system going, we're recording the encounter. If that person secretly records it, the court is going to be pretty reluctant to want to find that person guilty of a statutory violation like the one we have in Oregon. And so we provided training to our officers and made it clear to them that this district attorney's office is not inclined to prosecute those things. We have told our officers that if they have that situation occur to them, they can take an incident report and they can submit it through the chain of command. The DA's office can review it. But more likely than not, there will not be a prosecution.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The expectation of privacy that you were talking about, absolutely. That is the defining factor. As I tell people, you're at risk from YouTube as soon as you step out of your door. If you can be seen, in your front yard, you really don't have any privacy, and nobody really does anymore. I have one last question, and that is about these retention dates. You mentioned very early on that there are requirements, legal requirements, about how long these things should be retained or not retained past. And I was wondering whether some of these dates are hooked up directly to specific requirements, or whether, as you say, the 30 days was a default.
Well, that 30 days, this policy was written even before I was hired as a policeman, but my guess is, knowing what I know about our evidence or property retention rather, that's where that 30 days came from. Some of these other, I'll give you the heading, B3, 2B, which basically it's a bunch of underlined stuff on the back page where you have some of these investigations that will be retained on the following schedule for basically how an investigation is adjudicated internally. And those come from some Oregon administrative rules, which are very lengthy numbers. I don't have them on top of my head.
Thank you for
Mr. Miller knew. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well done. Okay, Tim?
Yeah.
So, in the recent audit of the evidence control unit, was there a recommendation by the auditing body for a timeline for retention of these types of items that are currently marked in 3A for 30 days?
I don't know the answer to that question.
No recommendation, or you don't know? And usually risk management also has a vested interest in those timelines for those retention policies, because it's not only important to make sure you keep them as long as you say you will, but it's also important not to keep them longer than that. So, anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Juan Carlos, you're next, and then Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the conversation on two-way recording was developing, and I was kind of wanting it to go there, but at the same time not, because that's one area that I really haven't been fluent in, not really fully understanding it. So the chief kind of helped a little bit more. There's been a couple of things that I've heard personally that, yes, the person who was videotaping an officer encounter, they were asked to turn in the video. And, what I will have a tendency to ask directly to the chief, are they taking somebody's video away? And it probably will not be a fair question because it involves a lot of complexity. But what I would want to know is, if I'm being recorded, can I record back the officer? And that I'm afraid that also connected to actual person stops and not necessarily specific to videotaping. In other words, if an officer pulls me over and says to me, I'm recording the conversation, I'm recording you, then do I have the right to say, well, then take a pause, I'm going to bring my camera also? And so if that's the case that I can do that, I think might resolve some issues that we come forward.
Would you like me to respond?
Please, if you don't
I'm probably not the one best suited to answer this, but I'll jump in anyway. Safety concerns aside, anyone can record an encounter with the police as it's occurring. It's a lawful thing to do, and we should be allowing people to do that if they ask to, as long as it doesn't create any safety concerns. And then if someone videotapes an encounter where a crime occurs during the encounter, which happens sometimes, an officer's attacked or an officer shows up whilst people are recording a fight or other crime, then the officer can ask to seize those recordings from those people because they're evidence of a crime in order to use to contribute to the case.
Is asking the same as requiring?
They could seize it and then obtain a warrant to search the device, whatever it is.
Thank you, Chief.
Joe, you were next, and then James.
Okay. I guess in response to the chief's discussion on this, I was wondering if it might be possible to include a reference to the Oregon law and the, any related materials regarding the videotaping in, say, one of the next packets that comes out, so that we can take a look at that stuff.
Okay.
Thank you.
The ORS of unlawfully obtaining evidence?
No, the statute on people videotaping each other. In other words.
Yeah, that's this.
When it becomes.
Go ahead.
Sorry, sir, go ahead.
Well, that's this statute right here.
Oh, it's already in the packet?
165-540 is unlawful interception of communication. And then subparagraph 1C is the exemption for police. If two people encounter, it's at the top of page 3. Two people, not police officers, encounter one another. One has got a hidden recording device.
Oh, okay.
They need to immediately notify
the
other that they're being recorded. There's an exemption for police because if our first encounter is a fist fight, then the officer won't have an immediate opportunity to notify them that they're being recorded. They can wait till after the fight. And that's why this exemption was written into the law just a few years ago.
Perfect. Thank you.
So is there something else you'd like?
Well, I'll take a look at this one and possibly, but this may cover it. I didn't connect this particular thing with that, with the state law and reporting.
Okay, James.
Yeah, but just a question that's probably already been answered before, but I'm looking at paragraph B, section B, on the videos. Subparagraph under 3A, number 1, where it reference persons submitting such videos. Just for a little clarification, persons, we've talked about civilians and stuff, or non-police officers handling, associating with video stuff. Who do we mean persons? Is this someone that has recorded something and come along and said, okay, I got this video and I'm going to put, and then you submit it in evidence, or is this directly referring to the officer?
I believe this is referring to the employees, like the chief helped point out from his experience before, understanding when this policy was written, the intent or the flavor of it. And that this person's, I think you could line that word out and input department employees submitting.
Okay, because I wasn't quite clear, we've been talking about other people, like non-police officers and stuff that may be videotaping and stuff, and all of a sudden they come to the department and say, okay, I videotaped this and I put a label on it and stuff and want you to, because persons is kind of out there a little bit, so.
Okay, we have passed our time for a lot of time for discussion on this topic. Is the commission ready for a motion to approve or to request more time to make changes requested? We have a motion?
I don't have a motion, I have a question. Have we changed 30 days recommendation? Because if we're going to vote on this, the question is, has that been modified during this discussion or not? I guess we would need a motion to modify it.
Well, not to put the administration on the spot right here to make that change, I think we're going to need a motion to postpone till the next meeting so we can see that change and then vote on it.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by James, seconded Joe. We have a motion on the floor, discussion.
I might be able to help with this, if you don't
All right.
mind me jumping in. I think the 6 month is probably a good policy. but I would just want to make sure there isn't some intelligence, rulings around intelligence information that led to this 30 days or anything else. If the only determining factor in deciding whether it's 30 days or 6 months is the fear that police are holding on to information they shouldn't have, then 6 months is probably safer for all the reasons that you've talked about.
Okay, the motion is to postpone this until the next meeting for final approval. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, like sign. Motion carries. We are going to bring this up at next meeting, and I would hope that administration, or either Matt or someone will provide corrected copies of what the proposal is, so that we can all review that change, those changes. Thank you. Moving along, we have bias-based policing policy, and Matt, you still got the floor. So.
It's you, Matt.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
I
understand. That's quite all right. We're moving on to bias-based policing policy.
All right.
Which you've all been provided with a copy in your packet, and what we're going to try to do, because I anticipate and found out from the discussion on whom there'll be a lot of discussion on this topic, and even when we get down to number 9. But I'd like to continue as a policy of everybody gets to go around once before somebody else gets to speak twice. So we'll do it that way. Okay? Let's go ahead and start with Matt. Let Matt go ahead on this.
Sure.
Did you want to?
Well, I just had a quick comment before we get started. I believe that the EPD decided they were going to put a panel together to go over these documents. For the sake of timing and stuff, if a panel has not been convened yet and they haven't had the opportunity to visit that, then perhaps we should wait until the panel discuss this thing and then bring it back to us as a whole. That's my understanding of how this thing was going to go. Please let me know if I'm incorrect in that.
Yeah, let me clarify that, James. Thank you for bringing it up. It's a very good point. What we are doing now is going through a process that I anticipate will take us 3 months. We will hear the policy proposed. We will have discussion about what we, as commissioners, item number 9 on the agenda, expect, what the community expects, whether or not to include in this discussion, whether you want a public forum about it, whether you want to just handle it within the commission and advertise for people to come here to speak, how you want to deal with this. And then the next month will be to continue that discussion, and then anticipating in January that we finally approve whatever changes and whatever suggestions the commission comes up with. That's the time frame.
Point of information, I think the committee that you're referring to is a committee that the chief created to look at the data collection piece.
It's the entire program apart from the policy.
Yeah.
Okay. So
they got a different set of the work.
Okay. Thank you.
And if it helps, I could sequence that. I think it would help your conversation.
Certainly.
That committee was had their first meeting a week or so ago, and their purpose is to identify the data points that we would collect. That's the first order of business. That needs to be done by the middle of December so that the data points can be given to the vendor. We're able to do this now because of the new records management system that we have. Vendor knows the data points and the circumstances in which we'll be collecting that data, and we'll then modify the software, develop the software that will make that possible on the patrol cars. That work goes to the vendor at the end of December, 1st of January, and then between then and July, I asked that the Police Commission develop an interim policy that we can use, and we're going to need and in that 6 months, we need an interim, the recommendation from the Police Commission. I need to finalize an interim policy. I need to work with EPEA because they'll consider it to be a mandatory subject of bargaining that affects the workplace in a significant way. The policy will be finalized by July 1. We'll start a pilot project that will run for 1 year. Pilot project with a number of our officers will collect data. The committee will be asking how ideally to analyze the data and to report out on it publicly. and we'll evaluate that a time or two during the year of the pilot program. We'll make refinements towards the end of that year, and then we'll bring on the whole department as a requirement. Refinements to the policy that we develop and so on.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay.
so you want to present what's being offered?
Yeah. This is skeletal. You know, I don't want to steal any of the chief's thunder about, we're really looking for the commission's guidance for help in helping us flesh this into something that the community understands, supports, and can get behind. I've included several other policies from around the country in your packets. You're more than welcome to look through them. But I just want to emphasize as we walk through this that this is really skeletal and designed to, stimulate the discussion. The policy will look like this format-wise, but we're really looking that there will be some real substantive changes to this. So just to help stimulate the discussion, this is kind of the skeletal remains of what we have, and we'll put the flesh on. Most policies now that we see have this purpose and scope that basically just introduce the policy to somebody, just the layperson reading it, and just kind of give a brief kind of philosophical nod to the reader to kind of let them know where the policy is and where it's going. Under your definitions section, first let me go back to racial profiling will not be the title of our policy. It'll be something probably in the vein of like constitutional stops or professional contacts, something like that, and we're looking for guidance or input from the commission as well on what to make that look like, because we know there's all kinds of other immutable characteristics that go beyond race, so we're not going to make this, that's just kind of the common term, I guess, that's out there. This definition, it's named racial or bias-based profiling, but we are putting this definition to the city attorney to help us define what is an immutable characteristic, what isn't. Some immutable characteristics are still protected classes that we want to include in the definition, so just understand that this definition here will likely change, and we'll have, once Mr. Miller can return an opinion on what those immutable characteristics are, we'll have a better definition, and we'll probably have a better term, and then the corresponding definition. The policy language here was just, it was selected because the goal of effective law enforcement is to build trust with the community. So a lot of this language is selected that basically reinforces to the community that we are not going to use discriminatory practices to stop or suspect people of crimes. And this kind of, in a nutshell, outlines what we will not do. 402 subsection 3 is just another affirmation that racial or bias-based profiling, or whatever we come down on the term, it's unacceptable at the department. But we do have race or some immutable characteristics are descriptive in nature. Bald white man, I fit that description, but we don't want to use it as a predictor, right? Yeah, there's a couple of handsome fellows out there. But we don't want to use it as a predictor of criminality or why we're becoming suspicious of this person. So that's, we want to kind of brighten the line there for the reader. Yes, ma'am.
On 402.3, that's also, I take it, letting officers know that they can still use a description of a suspect in order to maybe affect a stop.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. This department responsibility, just like excessive force, we will require, as I think any department who has a policy around this subject, that we expect equitable, fair treatment to everybody, and that if you see, like just if you saw someone, an officer using excessive force, you have a responsibility to report that to a superior, or a sergeant, or a lieutenant, or something like that. In the detentions here, this helps, or this kind of lines out, one, that we won't, again, another affirmation that we're not going to use simply your membership in a protected class as a reason to stop or detain you. And then if and when we do get someone detained, that we have a requirement to explain in a police report, an FI card, something that basically outlines the facts, that what arose your suspicion. This person happens to be bald and white, but also they were in proximity of the crime within minutes. There was a description of clothing that includes, so we'll just ask the officers to flesh out the descriptors that will maybe help identify the reason for the detention. This subsection 4024 sub 2, that sounds like it has a whole separate discussion later in today, but I just wanted to outline that we will codify whatever decisions come from that in the policy. The supervisor responsibilities. With any policy I write or compile, and I think any effective policy, there has to be some requirements for supervisors to oversee and implement adherence to the policy. This section gives direction to supervisors, a reminder to monitor, and methods that they can monitor, and then what to do if they do encounter a suspected or a incident of racial or bias-based profiling, or whatever term we come down on, what to do with that. .402.6 talks about we want to use this information so that it's usable, and we want to capture it. Right now, if I stopped a person and they believed that my stop was unlawful and that I was motivated by their race or some other protected status, they would call the auditor, and we would capture that under constitutional rights, allegation of misconduct, constitutional rights violation. But that doesn't help us down the line, because there's a lot of other events that are constitutional rights violations, like excessive force, search and seizure issues. So on January 1, we're going to create a subcategory inside of the IA Pro system called discriminatory stop, where somebody who calls and says, hey, I was stopped by the police because I am bald and white. We will have a way to capture that, and capture that specific to other constitutional rights violations. So we'll have a much better perspective on the number, type, and then I've said all that to say we will then generate a report that will basically discuss, without using names or anything, identification of the citizens, a report that will help guide our training and deployment of officers. And we'll schedule a periodic review. Then the final section discusses that we will schedule periodic training. When and how frequent, that's to the training section of the administration, but that there will be a requirement for us to train. And if there are recommendations for when and how those go. That was my first policy discussion facilitation, so I hope I didn't, probably, judging by the looks, I probably ran all over it. But if you have specific questions or...
Okay, so let's get to that. Questions around the table here, anybody? James, and then Claire.
Okay,
James and Jim both.
which one?
I'm sorry, Jim was first,
Okay.
then, since I didn't recognize you, Jim, I'm sorry. Jim, and then James, and then Claire. And then
We're confusing, we look so much alike. that-
Yeah.
Bill, and then one
Well,
of
we didn't dress the same day, though.
How did you come up with the draft? Was it, I don't want to believe it.
This is, skeletally, it's a Lexapol draft. There are some things in here that I've tweaked from other policies I've looked at and reviewed, or how I know our training and instruction to officers have been historically. But for the most part, this is are you familiar with Lexapol as a policy system? Okay. This is, a majority of this comes from
Comes straight out of
Lexapol. Yes, sir.
Okay. I didn't know if there was something else or if it was a combination of looking at the samples you had and kind of pulling in what you thought were good pieces off of here to here, but came pretty much straight off of Lexapol.
For the most part,
Okay,
yeah.
great, thanks.
Okay, James?
Yeah, thank you. One of my other hats that I wore, where we pushed for the Senate, the state legislature to, on a bill, then we labeled it as hate crime. We didn't get very much traction on that because there was a lot of pushback because of the word hate. We later on got with our legislators, Senator Monroe and also Representative Luke Frederick, and we changed the name to bias, and they were able to swallow that one, and then we got it passed. So the title, racial profiling, of course, and I've even talked with the chief about this a little bit, probably it sends a trembling message. However, words are very important. So whatever term that you use, I would ask that you consider something like public targeting. All the elements and stuff involved in there, it is a part of that. And it does kind of say that an action, an activity. So it's just a consideration that I throw out there, and I'm pretty sure that you'll get many more and stuff, but the wording is very important. But more important than the title is the substance that you have within the document itself. Sometimes the initial name, a label that you put on there will draw a lot of adverse or reactive attention, but it's the substantive context which is really important. I think that you're off to a great start here to get this thing down, and I think that it's on the right track. I know that the chief is very interested in getting this thing done, and you've done some outreach to other departments and stuff to see what they've done. And I have no doubt that you've already checked with the state and stuff and see some of their language. This is not an easy thing to do, to kind of put something together, so it's very meticulous and stuff. It takes some time, and I applaud you for taking this on. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the queue is now Claire, Bill, Juan Carlos, I've had myself in the queue, Joe, and Tamara.
Thank you.
Edward.
So I was a little confused when you said this was boilerplate Lexapol, but the department has a current policy around this now?
In our stops policy, there's some language around racial profile.
Okay, so it's embedded within another policy.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. In terms of a possible title, what I came up with off the top of my head was constitutionally prohibited profiling, which doesn't make it specific to race, references constitutionality, and says it's something we don't want you doing. So that's just one idea. In terms of specifics, I noticed in some of the other policies too, there's this use of the word solely. So on page 14 of our packet in 402.4.1, detentions, absent other facts, a person's membership in a protected class will not solely serve as justification to detain that person. And that just raises a concern in my mind. I see that it's used in other department policies, and I'm sure there's good reason for it, but I recall way back some years ago when there was the training that Officer Cam Carr led, and there was the film that was used in that training to get at biased policing. There was a scenario where an officer basically said, well, I stopped that person because they were in this neighborhood. So that's not solely this person, it was in conjunction with their location, which was not in proximity to a crime in that scenario in that film. So just just leaving it in that context causes me a little concern because of that potential dynamic. I don't have a suggestion for how to fix that at this point. Another question, and this may be totally out of bounds in terms of what we would want to put into policy, but I wonder if we've done this anywhere else, if it would make sense to have any reference to the police auditor's office, if there's any good reason to have a reference within policy to the police auditor's office and some coordination with them. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'll just throw it out there for the chief to ponder.
Sure. Do you mind if I interject something? I can keep it to less than 30 seconds.
No, it's no problem.
All of our policies are stated either in the affirmative or they're a noun. Taser policy, for instance, is a noun, taser policy. We don't have any policies that say, this is a policy that tells you to not do the following. Everything's an affirmative. And I like the policy title that says equal enforcement of the law. So as you think about what title and what the language ought to be, I will be, when I refine this ultimately, everything that I possibly can will be stated in the affirmative. So if you want to think in those terms, that would be
Sure. I don't care if you don't use my suggestion. And it's hard to come up with suggestions not knowing kind of what the boilerplate is. But anyway, so, other folks may see things that are missing, and obviously the 4.2 section needs to be fleshed out, but I actually think as a boilerplate, it's pretty good, with the exception of that one concern I raised, and I think keeping it as straightforward and clear and simple as possible is going to create the best policy. So those are my thoughts right now.
Thank you. Bill, and then Carlos, and then me.
I just want to say thanks for including the other law enforcement's policies on this. I think that was helpful. I think the one thing that I did notice, if you read those, and probably because this is a boilerplate, but the theme or the language they use made me feel better that they were serious about not doing this type of stops, where ours that you have here, it was sort of like, it almost made me feel like we have to do this, so this is what we did, where the other ones more felt like they were really telling their employees not to do this. And the other thing is, on the 402.41 on the detentions, you used protected class, where none of the other ones used that, and I like that, like you did in the first definitions, where you actually list out and also include identifiable groups. I think because those may not be protected class, but we also want to do that. I mean, a silly example would be they might think people that wear bow ties are causing trouble, and so they want to stop anybody that has one, but that's not a protected class. So I think we need to make sure we keep that to all those different places, so.
But they do cause trouble.
They do. There's trouble there. So, yeah, I just think we need to just kind of refine that a little bit.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Carlos?
Is racial profiling happening right now in EPD? Maybe ask the EPD representatives.
Is racial profiling happening? Well, the point of this is to determine that.
Okay.
As you know, we're not collecting the data, so the only data we have is related to enforcement. Our enforcement actions don't suggest that it is.
And yet, I have spoken to a lot of people that have been in this community for a long time, talking about African Americans, Latinos, and Asian people, and some Native Americans, and they all say that yes, that's happening with the Eugene Police Department. So obviously we have two stories, and of course the need for this type of policy. I'm not looking at whether or not we're going to collect data and prove one or the other. It's just whether or not we're going to have high expectations for the officers. And in that regard, I'm happy that we finally are suggesting, this is your policy, as Commissioner Miller would always say. But I don't see a lot of a lot of opportunities, hopefully they will be created in the future, to bring those community values. When Commissioner Manning was talking about even the name of the policy, that actually makes people like me not even want to be engaged. So having to even suggest that you should change the name to other than racial profiling, that to me suggests that we still have a lot more work to do with officers. So sure, I'll be happy to provide some different names. Looks like the chief already has one that he prefers or he wants to suggest, but in the end, the chief's plans to have another committee to work on the data and then bring it by and hopefully have the stamp of approval for the police commission. It makes me wonder, then why are we here? Why not have the police commission do that section? I do like and appreciate that you brought in different policies for us to look at. I encourage the police department to, in fact, keep the protected class language in there, because those type of policies, in fact, are more likely that, according to my experience, that be affecting ethnic and actually people of color. So while I respect my colleagues in terms of, all their descriptors of folks in general, it still is affecting disproportionately people of color. So let's not forget that. So I highly encourage that is kept. In the end, with all the respect to the chief, and I don't mean any disrespect to anyone at the table, there is a perception that people are being racially profiled by the police department, by the Eugene Police Department. Some of us get to hear it. Some families that I work with are afraid to come forward. So maybe the data collection system, depends on how they do it, will actually gather more data. That has been there. There was a study by a graduate student at the University of Oregon. He said, here it is. So we're going to be doing, finding ways to collect data, and then here's the data, and then we get a new chief and we get a new approach. That's what I'm hearing. So whether this body says, well, here it is, it's the best possible way, I want to see what's going to happen. So I see an officer, you create a policy in which you say the purpose, and you say you may not do this, but I don't see anything that what's going to happen to an officer that does that. I don't see it anywhere here. If an officer, in fact, is caught by another officer, say, he says here, if you can report it, and you watch it, whatever, what's going to happen? It's not in the policy. I want to see officers know specifically, if I do this, this is what's going to happen.
Like
and on
what?
the point of Councilor Syret, this is also connected, very much connected to place. So even at this table, I've heard before say that somebody not belonging to a specific neighborhood, that is racial profiling to some of us. Thank you.
Just, do you mind if I ask a quick
You may
question? 'Cause
respond, certainly.
what did you mean by that? What would happen to an employee? Are you talking about discipline or something else?
I want to know what the consequences is. I mean, it's hard to, hopefully with some data, and there's going to be some training and all these community dialogues and all this great stuff that I know it's going to happen. But I still don't know what the community is expecting, that how the corrective action would be taken by the department. Sure enough, I'm not asking for people to tell me, anything about HR. That's your deal. That's never public. But it has to be clear on the expectations. What happens when an officer pulls me over because I'm Latino? I want to know what exactly is going to happen. There's nothing in any other policies. So why not put it here? Okay.
You'd like to know whether there will be discipline if this policy is violated, and you'd like that to be written into the policy?
Well, that would, because your goal and the goal of the DAs and the goal of the sheriff is to create the trust and build the trust among the people that are more likely to feel like they're being racially profiled. We have to know that there's going to be some kind of consequences or expectations for training or whatever that might be. I don't see it anywhere. I think that would be a good place for us to, at least for you to consider. But again, it's your policy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And I'm next in the queue, and then after me, Joe, Tamara, and Edward, and then George. And then Jim after review, okay. I was also aware of that section that Bill brought up, so I immediately, my eye went to that protected class, okay. You know, the policy does such a good job of defining the policy and the definitions of the classes that will be considered in this policy. I mean, it's encompassed more than what the protected class is. If you use protected classes under the Constitution or the law, then it defines those classes, and that's specifically what they're talking about. We went beyond that in the policy to include every other type of similar group that might be considered as part of an ethnic or cultural or disability, all the any other affiliation. So we've done a great job defining it. Why would we then go to, for 2.4 and say as a protected class? So I think, and it's just my suggestion maybe, but I think you ought to insert language in there in 402.4.1 to say as defined in 402.2, because in that case, it leaves no question in the mind of the officer who we're talking about here. A protected class has to cause him to go to the Constitution and see what exactly we're talking about here, and then to all the law that's been made after that to see which classes are considered protected, because not every one of these in here is a protected class. So we need to, if you're going to include that definition with all these different people in there, let's refer to it in the policy and make sure they're clear. There won't be any question about what it is they're supposed to be adhering to. There'll be no question about it if you add that in there somehow. Yes, sir. Okay, so that's my suggestion. And now Tamara?
Oh, Ed had his hand up before me, so.
Oh, he did? All right. So Ed and then Tamara.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll try to be quick then. Thank you. I'm frankly really excited to be able to take back to the Human Rights Commission the news that the department will be tracking rights violations, a box you can check in the data as of January 1st. That's the kind of thing I'm on this commission to carry back and forth, and that's good news for me to take there. I want to second what Bob said about protected class. Make it as broad as you can. One of the exciting things to me about working in civic affairs in Eugene is I keep finding out that we're like up there in world leadership class on various things. Did you know the United Nations has recognized Eugene for some of its human rights work? So when I see us out ahead of just the protected class, I'm very enthusiastic about that. As far as, is there now racial profiling in the department? Hard data is going to come from this collection as I gather it. When I talk to citizens about what am I doing at the police commission that I could share with you, I say I'm really excited about the fact that there's going to be a spreadsheet at some point where the data is going to jump out at you and say, this officer has a whole lot of stops for this. That's something you can address. That's something you can address through the training of the officer. You know right where the problem is. It isn't sort of a nebulous, some cops are. So I'm enthused about that. I would reiterate that profiling is not just racial, so let's take that into account in our title of our policy. And the last thing is I noticed in one of the other cities' policies that they made a very specific point about probable cause for stops. Can you articulate it? You can't just say, I pulled this person over because they were hinky, or they were in the wrong neighborhood, or they didn't look right to me. And I think that can you articulate it in a police report and in a court is really important, because that's sort of a real test right there in the field. Why am I stopping this person? So I'm enthused to see maybe some of that language. Okay, I'm done.
The Leon County Sheriff's Office policy is the one I think, it's really geared for, like the chief was pointing out, a real affirmative definition of where we want. Not just a litany of what we won't do, but what we will do that protects citizens' rights.
Well, what's the goal you're trying to accomplish? Sorry. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, Tamara, and then George, and then Jim.
Thank you. I echo the sentiments that others have made around the table about the title, and I think that's been discussed about, since the definition is not solely limited to race, it would be appropriate to call it a different title rather than racial profiling. I think this is a really good start. This is the first time we've, seen any policies about this, and I think it's a good start to the discussion on this. I like in the California city policy called Equal Enforcement of the Law, how Section 4 is a little more clear in the bullet points A, B, C, and D about the manner of making arrests, how it's clear about arrest must be based on probable cause or an arrest warrant. Any detention must be based on reasonable suspicion. Any traffic stop must be based on probable cause or reasonable suspicion. I kind of like how they've just highlighted that a little bit more by making these separate sentences than maybe the language that we have in the draft policy, and I kind of like how it's a little more clear on each one of those points. Because anytime you can be more clear and brief in a policy, I think that's a good thing. So as far as having any kind of HR consequences embedded in a policy, I would assume that the policy the department has that talks about policy violations and what the corrective action is or the HR course of action is in relation to violation of this policy or any other, in my opinion, it should be even-handed. I don't think that one policy, violating one policy should be any more important or less important than violation of any other policy. And I believe that's captured in one of the general policies that the department has in their operating manual. I like Bob's suggestion about protected class, and if we're saying this is the data that we're looking at, then referring to that section, protected class sections makes sense. So just as a point of clarification, Chief, on the data points, is it my understanding that there will be a separate policy about capturing the data points? You talked about an interim policy. Is this the interim policy that you're referring to? Okay, I wasn't clear if there was going to be a separate policy just dealing with the data points.
No.
And so my question then about the definitions in section 402.1.1 is it even possible for the software to capture all of these items, all these characteristics that are listed in the definition section in that software? I mean, this is a lot of different things here we're talking about capturing, or will it be limited to a more, a subset of these things that are listed in 402.1.1?
It probably cannot capture all those
Okay.
things.
Thank you.
Okay, George, and then...
I wanted to say that I really like the idea. I'm a measure and a scientific kind of guy, and I love that this is going to be a scientific way of measurement. I really, really think that's cool because, to answer your question, is there prejudice in Eugene or on the police department? My opinion is, you tell me you're not prejudiced, you're either lying or in denial. I mean, everybody's got their bias and their prejudice. So are police officers prejudiced? I would suspect probably so, just like every other human being in the world. Does Eugene take it very, very seriously? Oh my gosh, being on the Citizens Review Board, they take it so very, very seriously. There's been 2 incidences of an Afro-American being pulled, or one being pulled over and the other one being another person thought they were discriminated against. And I can say with all my heart, if there was anything done, it was because there was no prejudice done at all. The in-car video, thank goodness for, showed the police officer could not have possibly known how they pulled over. So I think I applaud Eugene, first of all, for measuring it, taking it seriously, and when there is a case, I'm a dollars and cents guy. I want to save the city money. I'm a pain for the board because why do we spend so much money on that? When it comes to that, as Mark says, there is no expense spared. They take it, in my opinion, way over the top to make sure there is fair treatment for people that feel there's prejudice. And I applaud the department, and thank you, Pete, and for doing that, and Gisner, and getting that whole thing going. I think they do an incredible job when there is, racial profiling, at least in the two cases I can think of. There was a third case, something different. And to answer your question, from what I understand, and I'm not a HR person, but to have what happens to somebody, what happens to a police officer is strictly prohibited. In the CRB, we cannot know what happens to it, and I think it gets mixed up with the union and all kinds of stuff, but we never know. And just Tuesday night I said, can we find out what happens to these? Absolutely not. So you probably understand more about why that is, but from what I understand, well, I don't question it, it just is. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Jim?
You mentioned that there are some other kind of profiling, like you talked about the card, that there are some other policies that are kind of along the lines of profiling or
There's, I think,
racial.
our car stop or our stop policy addresses it inadequately in that one policy.
Okay, I'm hoping that those will, at least the language will kind of be linked up with this, so that we don't have one policy kind of saying we're kind of pointing this direction and we have another one that's pointing the other way.
Yeah.
As you're working through
Yes.
this. Also, I'd like to agree with Claire where she talked about, I thought this policy was actually pretty good as it was written, especially for a first draft, and keeping it simple I think it also is important. Because you can really get bogged down in a lot of minutia, especially here, and I really like the chief letting us know, talking about it, and just to try to work it into the affirmative, because that's going to help him, because that's the way he likes the policies to go. I think that's a good idea for us a good point for us. I wasn't aware of that, so I kind of like getting that information too, to keep it headed that way. And, what Juan Carlos talked about, putting in, what are the penalties? Do other policies have penalties for violation? I couldn't think of any that did, so I would hate to make an exception in one policy. I agree that it's, with what Tamara had to say, was if there's a policy violation, it should be handled as all policy violations are handled. And back to something that Edward said about something that we teach our tellers and MSS people, our frontline people. It's not always something that you can see that makes you think that something's wrong. And sometimes it's very hard to identify why you really think that there's something wrong. I mean, we teach them, if the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, it's kind of like your sixth sense is kind of kicking in and kind of saying, there's something a little hinky, a little not quite right here, and to follow those intuitions. And I know it sounds like the police are really limited in being able to do that, which is kind of, I look at that as good in some ways, and I look at that as bad in some ways, because it might prevent them from being able to stop some things that their intuition is saying, hey, something's just not right here, but I can't do anything because I can't identify something specifically that points me in that direction. That's good for me. Thanks, Bob.
Okay, thank you, James. And then we have James and Joe and Juan Carlos.
Thank you. Great conversation so far. There are a number of issues that have been raised in this discussion. George certainly had some good comments and good feedback and stuff about how his other organization reviews the different reports and stuff that come in and stuff. Is there racial profiling that's going on right now with members of EPD? I would argue that nobody would really know. We're individuals, and individuals are subject to do anything. Again, someone brought up about us having our own biases. I do feel that, however, that we have an opportunity. Apparently, some of the members of the community that Juan Carlos is most closely associated with or come in contact often, perhaps there's an opportunity again for the police commission to do more outreach to try to reconnect or connect, to assure folks in the area and stuff that EPD is trying to do the right thing, it want to do the right thing and stuff, and that's the only way that we can do it. We can't just sit back and say that this is going on and not make an effort in order to kind of fix what's perceived to be going on. I don't know. Does it happen? Perhaps it does happen. Can we fix it? We surely can engage it, but we can't say that it's going on and we don't go out and try to fix it. So I would ask that this body, and Juan Carlos, if you have some recommendations, certainly, I am fully supportive of that because it's supposed to be a safe place for everyone here. And I do know that the leadership, police leadership in this room here is dedicated to that. I'm confident of that. The other part, we're talking about putting down the punishment stuff. Back to Jim's point, I haven't noticed that that was done in any other policy either. And to do so now would set a precedent that we would have to go back to all of the policies and insert language like that. I think that there is already wills in place that will address actions for violation if anybody violated the terms or any other policies on the department. So language is very important, but whatever you title it is secondary to the content that's embedded inside of the document. When the document is explicit and explains everything simple, short and sweet, that is what it's about. It's not about, we can call it blank, but whatever is in there is what's important. So I think that, hey, we probably need to do some more outreach. And maybe that's not the answer, maybe that's not the full answer, but at least it's a step forward. Thank you.
Okay, Joe?
First of all, I really like this. I think it's very proactive. I'm very pleased that it's happening. I think it's important. Particularly I've been in Eugene for 6 years now, and I came from Orange County. So down in Orange County, I got to experience a very different type of policing, and being close to Los Angeles, I also, experienced some of that too. Specifically, Irvine, where I think the police had a sort of siege mentality to keep the riffraff out. And the thing that I experienced there, which is kind of a different twist on this that you may want to look at, is there was a period where, I learned about this later, which sort of explains the behavior, but there was a period of 3 or 4 years where the police were refusing to take reports. And we learned about this later, that what had happened was Irvine had dropped from being the city with a population over 100,000 with the lowest crime rate to about 6th or 7th. And the word came down from all the developers that those numbers were to be fixed. So the specific is, there were several examples that I could bring up, but the specific one was my car was stolen, it was broken into, hot-wired, damaged. And however, I found it. Cell phone was taken, things were taken out of the trunk, and I got an officer there to, I called up to have a report taken, and they said, well, you found the car. It was, down the street a ways, but I did find it. And so they said there's no crime. And I'm having an argument with this woman officer about, excuse me, the car's, and you have an opportunity to find who did it because the cell phone was taken, and that should be easy to track down where the calls were made. So after about 45 minutes of arguing with her, her supervisor showed up. And so there's about another 20 minutes of my arguing with them that they should take a report. And it finally dawned on me, and I asked the question, if I had more money, would you be taking a report? And the response was, yes, sir, we absolutely would. I think that you have, the problem of people being stopped. I remember the first time about 2 years ago, one of the first meetings at the City Hall that I went to when I started pestering the City Council, there was a black professor at the university who had been stopped, and he was not particularly happy about that. So, we do see these kinds of examples, but that's the case of the police actively targeting an identifiable group. However, the second problem comes where groups that do not have high status do not get the service that they, as I see, should deserve and should get. There's a lot of, for example, unacknowledged privilege in this room. And so the question comes down to having a policy that maybe includes some of those concepts also, where, instead of, officers going after an identifiable group, there's also the cases of officers refusing to serve an identifiable group. And maybe we want to include some kind of language to that effect. But in general, I think, and I guess one more thing, I sort of like the two lists in the 4.211 and 4.22, where we have lists. I think those are very good starts. In some cases, people would call them, quote, special rights. There is the whole constitutional thing. But I think that it's a really good place. It's an excellent beginning, and I'm very, very pleased. Thank you.
Okay, we have Juan Carlos, then Clara, then George.
Thought it was down the road. Okay.
We're getting close. In fact, we're well over on our time. And so we need to kind of limit this discussion now. And we can continue because it's going to come back to us again next month. So we continue it again. But if you have something specific to recommend to change, then please by all means do. We've already mentioned a few changes we'd like to see. So go ahead, Juan Carlos.
Thank you. I do like the policy on the Leon County Sheriff's Office and how they're defining, which is, it talks about the selection of an individual based solely on a trait common to a group for enforcement action. This includes, but is not limited to. So includes but not limited to needs to be a part of this policy under section 2.1 under definitions there too, and I think that will kind of capture some of these items, and the rest of it is kind of what is similar. It seems to me that based on the intelligent and lively and in some cases I assume personal perspectives, it's been good for us to have this kind of discussion. It's obviously overdue. And at the same time, it seems to me that this body might benefit from having a discussion on human rights versus civil rights and how each may or may not affect specific groups. I think that this body, because being a policy recommendation body, not policy making, but policy recommendation body, might in fact benefit from having that conversation. Officer, tell me your last name again.
Lowen.
Lowen?
Yes, sir.
Is, we have, you guys have a locker room policy, right?
Correct.
Is that locker room policy the same importance or on the same level as this policy that we're looking at, profiling?
By importance, well, as in more frequently encountered, maybe?
Right.
I would say that a policy around racial profiling, and I'm only using that term because that's what we've got in front of us, is probably more substantive and important to the community than how we keep our locker rooms clean.
So the locker room violation policy, would that affect the community? Would that be a community impact policy?
Doubtful.
Okay. So, fellow commissioners, I hear and understand what you're saying about if you're not putting the cause and effect on it, on every other policy, why would you want to go there and all this? I hear it. I understand it. But this policy is not like any other policy. In fact, there is no policy for EPD. So I'd like you to think about that for a while. And just one more thing, Mr. Chairman, that the data collecting system that Chief is trying to implement and later on the police commission to give okay and the blessing is really not going to, in fact, yield a specific officer or employee of EPD that may be doing certain activities. There's a big thing called the police union that in fact is going to keep that from happening. So let's be clear on what the limitations on even that's going to come up. So right now, as I understand it, the union is actively trying to figure out how not to, in fact, identify any officer. If that was the case, that would be easier. I've been a victim of or what my perception has been for years, that specific officer has been targeting specific groups, and I'm thinking Latinos and African Americans. Would the union let that officer be vetted through it? It's not going to happen. So we have to look at it, if I may, direct some. It has to be then approached in terms of what will be the expectations of the whole department, and how and when we should be bringing those community values. I want to know what the threshold is for me. Me as a member of this community, as a citizen of this community, what are my rights? What is the threshold? Can I just walk down the street and into a neighborhood that I don't know and not be bothered by the police? That's the substance that I think needs to go into this type of policy. Thanks for the extended time, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. And Claire?
Yeah, thank you.
And George, and then I'm cutting him off.
Be brief too, and I don't have any new ideas, but I wanted to reply to what I heard from others. I really liked Tamara's suggestion of bullet pointing the various stop scenarios to call those out. I think that's a good suggestion. To the question of whether this is about racial bias or other bias, I think, as Ed said, while ethnic minorities are the main victims of unlawful profiling, the fact is that others also suffer from it, and if we don't include them, then we'd be perpetuating an injustice there too. And I think Joe's story was very interesting. I think it points to this idea of not just an enforcement action, but also a service action, and that there can be a bias displayed there too, which I hadn't thought about. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And so I think maybe what the chief was referring to about, I'm going to lose the language now, but an affirmative policy around uniform policing or uniform enforcement in service might capture that idea. And, I completely understand the skepticism that Commissioner Valle is expressing around the data collection and its power to affect change, but if we don't collect the data to begin with, then we're never going to get even towards trying to identify the problem and how we might address it. So I think it's been a long time coming. Again, when I worked with the ACLU of Oregon, we were trying to move the department in this direction, and finally funding and opportunity have come together. So I think we do have a real opportunity to set up something. It won't be perfect, it won't get at everything we're hoping to get at, but it's going to take us a big step forward from where we are right now.
And I'll make this real brief. Joe, you bring up something. I was in Key West last week, and drinking in the streets in Key West. And as far as I knew, it was legal. Duval Street was covered with alcohol, people walking around. Read in the newspaper, homeless guy, scruffy guy, got arrested for drinking on Duval Street. It's illegal to be drinking alcohol. Us upper crust, so to say, the police didn't bother. Eugene, now let's flash to Eugene. I've witnessed homeless drinking. By the way, I've done a car ride along around the university, and I don't know how many tickets we handed out that night for open container. But let me tell you, it was over half a dozen, and mine are in possession. Now, homeless people have been drinking outside of my establishments. I call the police come, they say, hey, move along, don't be doing this, no ticket at all. Is that bias? I don't know. That really, really confuses me. So, we do have a lot of work to do, but there's bias, I believe, going both ways here. Is it because university students have money and they can afford to get the ticket? I don't have an answer. Or is it, great questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next agenda item, and that you'll bring back the changes reflected by the commission to our next meeting, and we'll take action on it. Next item is approval of minutes. Everybody has had a copy in their packet. Is there any changes to those minutes from the previous meeting? Please say now. If not, I'll take a motion to approve.
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay. Motion made to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, we're adjourned for a 10-minute break, and we'll come back and finish our discussion.
Data professor.
So what was the gig of that SUV? That really confuses me.
told me about.
Plenty of homeless people get tickets. I represent them all the time.
Yeah, but I.
Congratulations.
100% of university. Right. But it's really weird. I have, I had a couple friends, and by the way, when it comes to the police, I empower them. You do what you think is best. But as this show has kindly done, move along to where? And, if somebody has outstanding warrants, then they get arrested and put in jail, and, they don't do anything about it, so.
Why are you?
I love this group because it just gives me all these different possibilities. It's so,
There's all kinds of cleaning. Landscaping service like a bus that comes by every 2 hours.
I'm getting more and more ignorant every day.
It is.
I mean,
Turned out.
That's great.
I guess.
It's been a fun
Thank you
days
for
to
your
have
input.
here.
I value your input.
ready.
And Joe's input too. He has a great story.
Well, since we stopped having subcommittee meetings, that didn't help.
Comparison, I find
But
So how long have you been with the public defender?
much more.
Access to
Pretty much 2 years.
I grew up
although we do have some rules.
Let's see, we have the custody there. Digging kind of messed up. We're getting this in right now. It's been there
What
forever.
we're doing, and willing to listen to them.
I can't think of his name. Really nice guy.
That's
Older guy in his 50s.
There's probably arguably in the time that I've been.
One of the lawyers?
Yeah.
One of the better groups.
Or is he over at the Lake County?
I don't, actually, I don't know.
None of us,
Certainly I've been
I'm
in
with Eugene, public defender, and I just contract.
Oh, okay.
None of us are full-time.
Okay, I think he's full-time.
So, him as the Lake County public defender, that's their job.
There's some interesting history that goes across.
That hadn't had the same experience.
Complicated world in that in my business, I'm so, let's say, sheltered because we just deal with certain, certain kinds of people.
Yeah.
And it's really, all the way down to, he doesn't have so much anymore because if he's a car, it's kind of like,
Early to remember those kind of details.
pick up the car, got the bill, just drop the check through the mail slot.
Swearing in the meeting.
Why wouldn't I not trust you? You trusted me. I never got burned that way.
Advocating for marijuana.
You trusted me spending that money? Should I trust you to give it to me? But that's because, of, a little bit of upper end.
Got it, okay.
Upper end cars.
Oh, it's like this guy just motorcycle.
No, I just get the payment for,
They came in
to somebody for an hour or something, the consultation. Never worry about it, I've been stiffed a couple of times, but it's not worth the time for me to try to get the money. Don't worry about it. Most of the time people come to me. Right, yeah.
no mention of anything. I get to the institute.
That much
There are
I
people
was at the institute.
that are out to get you or will out to cheat you. And if you look through those glasses, always suspicious that you're going to get cheated. Maybe you have power in the world to get cheated more often, but it cheats all your. I'd rather get had a few times and give the trust to people than not have the trust. Yeah,
It's stressful that way, yeah.
yeah, and I don't.
I went out to shoot
Vinyl.
Strange world where we live in. This is so interesting. I couldn't
So,
I mean, talk about bias down there, Mickey bias.
and I taught
I mean,
myself.
I must have seen 400 people right down the street.
Did everybody?
Yeah, in Duval Street.
George, did you get yours?
Wild, crazy. I have one.
Okay, then I guess these are the extras.
Yeah, I had
I
one
can
from.
certainly use these.
I had one from Tuesday night. Remember?
Yeah, but that was specifically for CRB.
Oh, okay.
This is the one for police commission.
I heard most of what you said.
Wait, did you get the attachments? Because it's the first complaint of what I hope might be the last. Like, police officer.
Sure, I'll take it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Add to the problem? Was it an egregious use of their personal privilege?
After CRB, and every court.
We have those.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And she's so polite about it.
Relatively speaking.
Talk about it.
Right on. We'll ask Carol about that.
We want to know the biggest bias we've had with the Afro-American women.
I think this is good. I think.
And everybody's scared to say, oh, excuse me, you're past your 3 minutes. People were just scared to say anything, talk about intimidation. You remember that?
In the beginning, yeah.
Yeah, they intimidated.
About the time. Yeah.
Yeah, well, how many? I'm confused. I'm confused. One of my personality types, I've got a weird personality type. I see uneven things, they just come to me. It's gotten me in trouble numerous times because I see things other people don't see, and then I bring it up, and then I'm a troublemaker, so I have to keep my mouth shut. Very often, we had a problem with the chamber. They have a environmental, they have all these awards. They don't give a template to the people. Therefore, if you hire somebody who knows how to do that, you'll be much more willing to win because they know what they want. But if you put a template out there, ask them questions, you have this, you have this, you have this, to make the playing field level. I mean, it came real apparent when in the environmental ward that Guarantee applied for it, and they never even mentioned solar panels.
Vertical?
Yeah, really.
Because they didn't have a professional do it.
Right out this door.
And Cafe Yum won, that guy was a master at writing. I mean, he got down to what he put in his tile, you know. He knew what to put in there, so it's really nerdy. That's one example. I said, I'll help you make the template. Well, pretty soon I wasn't asked to judge anymore.
You're pretty high. Well, I'm not hurt by that.
You would just look like a surfer, you know.
What happened was, when I went through San Diego, arrived in the I was in this
Is there something going on?
Yeah, well,
I hope your chili's out better than mine.
Oh, yeah?
My tummy was not in accord with the brain.
Okay. Well, there's a place downtown called Soup.
I like soup.
Yeah, me too. I'm a big, I like soup because I just pretend that I'm doing something better. But actually,
I haven't seen any of my wife's soups. They are determinedly healthy. They're really healthy. Yeah. Stuff that's like cooked for 3 or 4 days. Yeah, for a while there, it was really a downside for marriage. It was both a good cook and a foodie. Like, thank God she travels from time to time. It gives some I didn't want to add to the time we were taking on this topic, but this seems like a natural policy for the HRC and this commission, partnering with the Department of Public Outreach.
yeah, maybe. That's a good idea. You guys will have to choose.
Yeah. Joint session or something.
When we're talking about
That's the big one. I don't think anything else is life-threatening. Nothing there. There's a lot of stuff that's suboptimal, a lot of things.
I believe it.
Life-threatening is a different
Put it up to a different level.
Because what's happening
That's a difficult area. Thank you for your hard work on this.
interesting things.
And presenting it so nicely.
I was just three people. It's okay, go on and on and on and stuff. But at least I think I got a good argument for my, what's
What happened?
Then I'm going to get Jim, sit next to him and put on blinds. I suppose knocked over.
Oh, next week. Okay, if we could go back to the table.
Why was my phone been buzzing?
Okay, no, it was an unfortunate situation because at the same time, the,
Okay, don't need to know that.
Sure. I know I'm only supposed to answer questions, but would you like me to say anything before
This format work okay for you? Is that okay for you?
this
Format
conversation?
Where just people ask questions after they've written the report? Work okay for you? I mean, if you want the opportunity, that's fine.
You can hit your high
Take your opportunity. Or hit the high points or however you feel like you present it. I'm okay with either way.
I do usually take a couple minutes to respond to some things that came up.
Okay.
So if you want me to, I can do that. Or
Segue right into the.
I think we should just start.
Okay, we'll call the meeting back to order, please. Everybody come take your seat.
Just save us having to change it later.
Okay, our agenda next is the chief's report, and the chief would like to bring up a couple of things and then hit the high points on this.
well, with the new format, where I answer questions about the presentation that went out earlier, I now have an opportunity to respond to some of the things that I heard that I thought you might want to know answers to. So if you don't mind, I'll just comment on a couple things. The Fix-It Ticket program, we can consider a policy that would require that officers issue the pamphlets. I don't know what all the implications are of that sitting here now, but we'll talk about it internally, and Lieutenant Reynolds will help me to guide that conversation in the department. And then the on-street camping interaction that Majeska mentioned is something that we should learn more about. If an officer actually said that to someone, then that's not right. We should look into it. So I would appreciate if we can hear a little more about that at another time, Majeska. The catalog of resources that the council discussed, I don't know the status of that, but I can find out, and Carter, in one of her updates, will send something out to the commission on an update for that. I made a note about it.
I believe it's being worked on by Michael Wist.
Probably. That would make a lot of sense, but I don't know where it is. So if you'd like to know where it stands, we'll look into that. And then the discussion on the policy for bias-based policing, or whatever we end up calling it, is such a tough issue because the harm caused by regulating enforcement based on population's immutable characteristics is so upsetting that it's hard to know if you could develop a policy that would adequately address it, But I completely get the point that was made earlier, that this is a question of how we're treating humans based on their physical features and other protected classes, and so it's different than other policies, and may call for different language that you don't normally see in other policies. And I know there is some skepticism in the community as to whether or not the police department will ever take this issue seriously, and that's typical in every American community, I'm sure. What I hope that you'll all do is tell me where you think a policy or the draft policy is falling short, so that we can do what we can to address whatever fears or concerns are out there. Of course, it'll be impossible to do everything, but unless I know about it, I won't be able to do anything with it. And then the discussion about fair and equal or balanced services together with fair regulatory decisions that we make, or enforcement decisions, is an interesting one. There's a policy that someone referenced where it says that we need to make sure that our enforcement actions are supported by the Fourth Amendment. The instruction that we give our officers is that it's not only supported by the Fourth Amendment, but also the 14th Amendment and by our policy, which is a much more difficult test to pass. It asks, is the enforcement decision balanced? Sort of like the question about, are we enforcing public drinking laws the same in one part of town or the other? Is what we're doing balanced? And this policy should help give guidance on those things. So, I believe you all got my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that.
All right, first in line here, Jesse?
Page 21 of the packet, total calls for service comparison, 2012 and 13.
Okay.
Person stops went up 20%, 6875 to 8290. You have any idea why, what is going on there?
Yeah, with the data-led policing, we concentrate our efforts in places where we think the crime problems are concentrated. And so that's caused some of it. And then the full establishment of the downtown team has us making more person stops downtown. In fact, we ran a report recently in response to a public records request which shows more calls for service happening in certain parts of the downtown. Those calls for service are generated by proactive police activity. So I think that's probably what it is.
And as you look at the categories here, calls for service, are there any duplicative numbers, or are the person stops completely, or is a call for service not going to turn into a person stop or a traffic stop?
The traffic stops and person stops are not included in the calls for service, but there could be other proactive policing activity that drives that.
And is a person stop anything that's not a stop of a person in a car?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, it includes bicycles, and may include bicycles and skateboards and
Okay.
pedestrians.
Okay, we have Jim next, then we'll Carlos, and Tamara.
You talked, on page 22, you talked about that, the officers that graduated. How many graduated?
These two that are in the...
Just the two that, I wasn't sure if
that
that's
are in
what the picture was
photograph
relating
there.
to or not. Okay,
Yeah.
so those are the two that graduated, okay. And I know it also mentioned the Springfield Police Chief situation process, or selection process. How is that going, or what can you tell us about that? Well, they've got one, but...
They've hired, made a job offer to the assistant chief from Medford, and I don't know exactly when he starts. I think it was in the paper, though, middle of December, perhaps. Is that what you're asking?
Well, and were you involved?
Yeah, there was a law enforcement panel, and the major from the state police, Sheriff Turner, and I sat on that.
And what impact on the, of the city prosecutor that was terminated, what impact, will that have any impact on EPD?
It won't change the prosecutorial capacity. We have a contract with the city attorney's office has a contract with the district attorney's office to provide prosecution services, so they've just taken up the slack.
Okay, sounds like they'll have a little extra workload then.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the ESPN College Game Day. What impact did that have on you guys?
It requires quite a security footprint in order to protect the stage from fans.
Was it, I know normally on the games, the school pays you, or the athletic department does.
Yeah.
Was this the same situation here, or did you have to foot the bill for this?
No, ESPN pays for that.
ESPN paid for it? Oh, good. I was hoping that wasn't going to cost any more explaining there. And on page 32, you talked about weapons that were confiscated, it sounds like. Were those were those weapons all used in a crime, or were they just confiscated? Or some of them confiscated as a result of other investigations?
Could be all of those things.
Could be all those, okay. And last, you talked about, there's 5 sergeant candidates. How many positions? Is it?
Well, we're about to promote 4 lieutenants, so we'll need at least 4.
So at least 4, so it's 5, 8, and 5. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, we have Juan Carlos, then Tamara, then Claire, then Edward, sorry.
It's okay.
Chief,
By the
thank
time
you
I
for-
leave, you'll have it.
Yeah.
Thank you for providing this in advance. That's actually been very, very helpful to look at all the things that the police department is doing. I had just a few questions. So are this info now available to the public, or once you have the packet to us and that becomes public?
I don't recall what the PIO's publishing on our webpage, but we have put these out to the public. I don't know if we're still doing that routinely, though.
I see. So I have noticed that even when you first were hired as chief, that some of the recommendations that were made to you, and some by me perhaps, to see if you were going to be going out there in the community. And I have to tell you that I was kind of skeptical that you actually would be out there, and you in fact have been out there quite a bit, and I commend you for that. In fact, I remember early on when you were doing the listening sessions, I remember clearly requesting that you did some listening sessions with Eugene weekly, and you ended up doing that, and I was kind of pleased that you did, and you actually had invited him, and at some point you ended up doing that. You have also been pretty accessible and listening and willing to take action, which I hope that you keep it up. One thing that I'm missing, Chief, is I see that you're doing some hirings and some higher level hirings. Congratulations, Captain Camcar. And I missed that the police commission used to be involved in assisting you with those type of hirings. I hope you reconsider having the police commission, and specifically other groups in the community, like NAACP, Blacks in Government, LULAC now that it's here, and CALC and Blacks in Government. I think because that's going to be, moving forward, is going to be very important to maintain or create those relationships with those groups. Mm-hmm. And I'm not just saying because I represent LULAC also, but that would be important that you hopefully would consider to include those groups in helping you do the hirings. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I'm having to rely on my memory here, but we did, NAACP provided a representative. I'm trying to remember who else was on the panel. Are you able to help me with that?
I will.
Yeah.
Oh, so we did have someone from the police commission, and we had a HRC staff person. I don't believe we had someone from the HRC. No, we did. We had the chair from the HRC.
Right.
Is that official when they said it? That would be good to know that you're going so that we know that we have a police commission representative.
Yeah, that's true. I did not publish that. I
Yeah.
could have. That's-
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. We have Tamara, and then Claire, Edward, and then myself.
Chief, thanks for putting this information out. I just have 2 questions. Under property crimes, under fraud, I noticed that fraud was down, listed as down 38% year over year. Do you have any idea what accounts for that?
I do. We'll have 1 or 2, well, fraud suspects are prolific. So 1 or 2 can make a massive difference in the number of crimes we have. And so we had quite a few from just a few suspects last year.
Nice. And then under the weapons offenses, I noticed there was a significant increase in the possession of illegal weapons, 47%, which I thought sounded high. And is that because, do you know what accounts for that? Is that because there's just more crimes being committed with illegal weapons and you're able to capture that way, or do you know?
Anything I could offer would be
Okay.
a theory.
Okay.
And I have my theories. But
And the ones that say carry concealed, if they're, I'm assuming that's not an illegal carry concealed, that's a legal concealed weapon permit?
no, these are offenses.
Oh, offenses, okay. That was, I was like, okay,
So you can
thank you.
unlawfully possess a weapon that's not concealed. Okay.
Okay, I just wasn't sure if that was capturing, for some reason, legally concealed weapons, or if it was the other.
Yeah,
Thank you for
only
clarifying
crimes.
that. Thank you. That's all.
Claire.
Thank you. I just had one kind of curiosity question. I don't recall seeing this breakdown. I don't know which page it is. It's the 2012 versus 2013 crime comparison that goes into detail of kinds of property crimes. And I hadn't noticed that level of detail in our packets before. I think it's very interesting. I was curious. It's got residential burglary, commercial burglary, other burglary. What might fall into the category of other?
Out in buildings or something other than a residence that isn't a business. Can you help me with that?
I'm sorry, I was working on here.
Yeah,
What's the question?
there aren't many. What's an other burglary? Storage units.
No, okay.
Storage garages, detached garages that aren't associated with the residence.
Mailboxes.
And then I found it curious that automobile theft went up 23%, but truck, van, and bus theft went down 15%.
Yeah, the auto theft going up is a change, and we're not the only city seeing that. But we've been seeing a downward trend because of the improved security in cars.
And then bike theft seems to be on the rise again, 35% increase, a chronic problem here in Eugene. So I like this level of detail. Obviously,
Okay.
It's hard to draw conclusions about why a particular thing is happening, but I still think, without getting way super into the nitty-gritty, I think it's a level of detail that's of value. So
Good,
thank you.
okay, we'll repeat it.
That's it.
Okay, Edward?
I was looking at the increase in residential burglaries and in person stops, and I haven't mapped them out, but I know that our friendly neighborhood, like a lot of neighborhoods, went through a period in the last year where we were hit just brutally for about 2 months. It went from a burglary in 5,000 residences every 4 or 5 days to up to half a dozen or more in a day. And the suspect information over and over was people on foot or on bicycles. So we were very happy to see on our crime map in the Register Guard the next day that neighbors are calling on suspicious people and that, officers are coming out and saying, who are you and why are you here? But I don't know that there's any correlation between that bump, because I guess that was an organized group that actually hit us here in Eugene for a while, whether there's any correspondence between that spike in residential burglaries and the person stops that would have corresponded with that. Just a comment.
As the chief, I like to think that there is
Yes.
a relationship between them, but there may not be. I know our watch commanders try to drive that type of proactive approach.
It made a difference in our neighborhood, so I appreciate that. I had one other question that was about game day. I had the misfortune to be in charge of security for ESPN's Summer X Games in San Francisco many years ago. Also the rerouting of city buses and other exciting things. ESPN skipped town and left the city and county of San Francisco with several $1 million worth of promises. Did we get paid for game day yet?
I can't answer that because I really don't know, but they've hired us in the past. I think they've been here a couple of times in the last 4 years, and they've paid their bills.
Good. Good. Thank you. Done.
Good point, thank you. And I'd like to say that on the auto theft issue, that publicity that the police department was selling these clubs really worked wonderfully by the response. They sold out twice, first time, and then they sold out again within a day of those clubs here. So I think that campaign is effective, and you might want to consider, getting more of those and getting them out to different substations so people can have access to it and get them, because the more cars that have them on there, the better chance we're getting cutting down car theft, as was said. And the last thing was, segue into what Edward was saying. I keep checking crimereports.com, but I'm not finding no burglaries on there. So have you had any success with that yet?
Well, I immediately assigned that problem to somebody.
Oh.
I don't know, the next morning.
Good.
And I know they're trying to hunt it down, so
Okay.
I don't know the answer yet.
Okay, thank you, Chief. And George?
I did my job. I'm just
In the case of integrity and fairness, the club being used on 2005 newer vehicles, I think is a disservice because I don't think any amateur or professional as myself could steal a newer car. So I hope there is some kind of discretion in these being sold for, with the new chips in vehicles, it is very, very difficult to steal a car, if not impossible. A case in point, Saab lost, somebody stole the keys out of the new Saabs a number of years ago coming across on the train, and they all had to have new theft control units. Even Saab factory could not steal their own cars. So I hope there is, like I said, some discretion on newer cars. And I'm sure you have the stats on well, I don't know if you have the stats on what year a car was stolen, if there's any kind of statistics on.
I don't know that we know what kind of car the person owns that buys the clubs from us.
Or what kind of cars are stolen.
Oh, we do have that, yeah. I don't have it in mind, but I can have it for the next meeting if you like.
I have to have an article due at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Could you?
Now, would you feel the same about our sale of the clubs if I told you that it helped close the gap in the general fund?
I guess that would be fine. No, I don't think the profit, I think actually the profit level of that is not proper.
They cost $1,400.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I thought you were selling them at cost.
We buy them at cost. Joking, we do sell them at very low.
Cost is an interesting thing. It's, my cost is including my summer house, but that, yeah.
Okay, I'll have that in the next report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for pointing that out towards your expertise is always appreciated. So by the way, I have a brand new, fairly new Subaru, but I keep my club on there because it's red and it's big, and hopefully somebody doesn't even think about it, because what I'm not worried about the professionals, they know they can't steal it. I'm worried about some young kid who doesn't know he can't steal it and risk my steering column all hell trying to figure out how to do it, and I end up with a big bunch of damage. So that's why I use it. And my wife has a 90 Camry, which is...
That is bingo. That's the cars that's the cars that get stolen.
Okay, so moving on to a big item of the evening, and that's bias-based policing and collected data system. Now, what we have in your packet for you is a worksheet that was provided that will help us move the discussion into the area of what we want to see, from purpose all the way through process, and how we want to do oversight on that process, and what we expect as a commission on the outcomes. What the commission expects, what the community expects, and again, the EPD has their hopes for what we can provide them as well. So keeping that outline in mind, let's try to get through the process of talking about this. If somebody has an idea who'd like to start off, it's fine. We can start the discussion. Claire. Okay.
No, actually, I just have a point of information. So I'm not clear exactly what our conversation right now is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What the goal is.
I included a letter in the packet
okay.
with, yeah, it's in here somewhere.
Yeah, it's on the other side of the
okay, thank
page,
you.
yeah.
Thank you for finding that. Yeah, and so what that outlines is what the background, what EPD is trying to do, what they're planning to do, and what they would like us to do to help them do that. So those things in mind, what I would think would drive this discussion is the questions and concerns like one Carlos had a moment ago, and perspective is a reality. I mean, everybody has their own perspective on issues, and so if my perspective is that it's a sunny day, but there's clouds out there, and I say it's a sunny day, then that's my reality. It's not just some idea I have. And so taking that one step further to people of color or of a particular ethnic group who feel that they're being put upon in some way, that's their perspective. So we have to deal with and address that issue. We can't simply say, well, we don't believe that. We have to decide how we're going to deal with allaying their fears about bias in the police department. And I know that this is a sincere effort, that the police want to do that, because why wouldn't they? I mean, the fact that they're trying to be fair to everyone out there in the community and trying to give everybody the same opportunity. And so I think we need to, talk about how we can do that. What outcomes do we want? Let's start with the purpose. Why is this being reviewed? And what are we expecting? We talked about the draft of the new policy, and why else would we want to review what we're doing here? And maybe outline the process for doing that next. So, does anybody like to start off the discussion? And Tamara, is that you first?
I am just saying, since it's titled on our agenda as bias-based policing data collection system scoping, which seems to differ a little bit from the worksheet here, I just had a question. It's explained in our memo, but since this came up in the earlier discussion, Chief, I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the group that of community members you've put together to select data points. You gave us the timeline for that, but I was wondering how many people are on there, and how many data points can be selected, and how many data points in the software can be selected. So those kinds of things. I just want to hear a little bit more about that.
It might help to have Captain Kemkar come to the table if
great.
you don't mind. He's a little closer to some of these details than I am.
Yeah.
We want to see you.
We'd like to have people at the table.
Then you'll be on camera.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so just so that I can catch up since I wasn't paying quite attention, it's a question about the data points.
Yeah. About the group that's been put together and how many data points the software can be selected in the software, and then how many people are on the group, and like a little bit about how they were selected or who they are.
I'll let the chief talk about the selection process, and if you don't mind, and I'll talk about the data points and sort of where we're at with the group so far. The company, the SafeGuard vendor that we have, basically has, as they've described this thing to us, is that they have the ability to basically build this program to our needs, specific needs, which is good news for us. They've given us a set of data points that they have used in other jurisdictions across the nation, and what we have to do is to basically decide how many of these points we're going to include in the program. And as you can imagine, the more points that are included in that, the more time it takes on the part of the officers to collect that data. It certainly gives us better reports at the end, so we have to work our way through that. Now, aside from that, just as a matter of background, I want to mention that there are industry standards that are out there about what are some of the best practices when it comes to collecting data. And a couple of places that we're considering and looking at is one is a report by the Department of Justice about best practices, and I don't know if you have a copy of that, but it's actually all in open source information. And the other one is through LECC, which is through Portland State University, and they have taken charge for the past few years in helping the law enforcement agencies across the state of Oregon to really work through these policies, issues, community dialogues, analysis of the data, and so forth. So we don't know what it's going to look like at the end, but pretty excited about it.
Did we hear about that in this group before, about the DOJ best practices in Portland State University, or did I do that incorrectly? Did you guys, does that sound familiar?
I think so, yes.
Okay, so that was, I guess
As
I
point
need
of
that from
information,
Jim.
I believe it was included in our packet two packets ago with a link to the DOJ website that would allow us to, because I think I copied it, and I have it somewhere, but I can't remember where it is now. But James, you were next. I'm sorry to cut ahead.
About the makeup of the committee?
Okay.
Yeah, and I've been looking madly for a list of the committee members.
Well, it doesn't have, you don't have to say their names, I just was wondering like how they were selected and what you were looking for.
I made personal phone calls to 10 different people, and in order to make sure that key folks understood how I was going about asking for recommendations. And then I asked those folks to let me know who the 2 or 3 people are in this world that they'd absolutely like to have on the committee. And then by email did the same. That request went to all the police commission members, all the HRC commission members, and others in the community who often are willing to make recommendations about these types of things. And then I just looked for the common names and people I knew who could contribute to an intelligent discussion. And I invited, I think, about a dozen people who all accepted, including retired Judge Kip Leonard, who's co-chairing with Captain Camcar. So I feel pretty good about the broad representation that we have.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for playing that. Okay. Questions for either the chief or Captain Camcar can be included in this discussion. I'd just like to say that I did try to prepare as best I could for what we're going to face here and trying to delineate what it is we're trying to find. And I found different websites which, trying to define race, and I was amazed at the number of different suggestions as to, for instance, the Department Office of Management and Budget for the Department of Education says that ethnicity is separate from race. In other words, the first question they ask is Hispanic or non-Hispanic in ethnicity, and then they define Hispanic and they start saying, the different countries, Mexico, Cuba. They left out Dominican Republic, so I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, now they speak Spanish. I know somebody from there. Well, what about, the countries that do? And then they went on to say, or any other Spanish group or culture. So they've covered it, I think. And then from there, they go to race. And then they've included Alaskan or Native American. And then separately now is Hawaiian Native or Pacific Islander. So we have a different race, but defined by territory. But ethnicity is defined by whether or not you're part of a culture. So even just looking on Wikipedia, you can see morphology and all different types of identifiers. I mean, what we found is by DNA, by finding out is that 99% of us, all of us are 99% the same. There's only 1% difference in everybody on this planet in our DNA. So basically, we have to go by morphology, what the outward appearance of the person is, or what their culture they identify with is. And keeping those things in mind, I'm still trying to struggle with, exactly. It's pretty obvious to me, white and black, and Asian and Hispanic. Those some of those things are obvious, but sometimes it's not so obvious either. And so, who gets to decide, and who makes that decision by making a judgment? I don't know. So those are the kind of things I think we need to concern ourselves with to make it right. And so, keeping that in mind, James, you were next, and who else held up their hand? I'm sorry, Joe.
Mr. Chairman, it's interesting that you brought that up. I was just looking at it. It was emailed to me, and I was looking on it was a television program that recently occurred. This guy is a devout supremacist.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. 14% black.
Yeah. There's very not much he can say about that, He just said back he didn't even want to take it, as a 1%, 14%. The bottom line is that we're all interrelated species, and I believe that there's only one creator, and we are all created, and we develop our own self-indulgence and dislikes and stuff based off of our learnings from birth and stuff. Hatred is never something that's inbred in a person. It's taught. It's a behavior that's taught. So how we move forward with this process, I think that we're off to a great start with a first draft. I would be interested if the chief could share a little bit about the makeup, the broader scope. If we have all stripes of the rainbow that's involved in the process from all economic classes and stuff, because it goes back to something, excuse me, that Joe had suggested that if you don't have any money, then you don't have any say-so, or people will just overlook you. And I think it's important that we make sure that everybody is represented, because everybody has a say-so, and if we don't include everybody or try to, then our results may come out not as being projected as not exactly what we want it to be. So, not to go into any detail or anything like that, but just kind of, I heard that you mentioned about former judges and stuff like that. They view things a little different, of course we know, than somebody that lives, that's unfortunately in a shelter right now. Of course, we probably couldn't get anybody from a shelter in there, but that's what I'm talking about, the broader spectrum. If this committee that's put together has that much latitude involved in it, a judge is going to see things from a different perspective than, say, perhaps a new immigrant to the country would look at it and stuff. So
there isn't a great economic disparity. We don't have anyone who's homeless, or I'm guessing here a little bit, but who is living below the poverty level. We have academics and people who work in the school districts and corrections, and 3 police officers, 2 representing the police union. Help me out.
Dave Fidanki.
Dave Fidanki from the ACLU.
Police auditor.
The police auditor's on there. Yvonne Alex Asenso from the University of Oregon's Equity Office. She's the vice president. Community activist.
Okay. Just as a follow-up, if I may then, here, as far as the police commission is involved, or an opportunity to consider to provide some type of input from a community standpoint, the police commission could form, as the outreach committee and stuff, and go out to some of the public that is not a part of this to provide some input regarding that. So it's an opportunity. That way we can say that everybody has had a piece of the pie, or had a little bit of a say-so, if that makes sense.
Okay, I have Joe, then Claire, and then Juan Carlos, and then Edward.
Okay, I guess what we're sort of talking about right now is some kind of a form for data entry. So what are the categories that would be put on a form of this nature? I guess before we go down that path, one question would be, is the intended system going to be paper entry, or is it going to be electronic entry, or do you know at this point?
The whole premise behind this is to go live using the new CAD RMS program that we have, so it will be electronic.
It'll be electronic. Okay. I guess one thing, to follow on to James's statement is, we are essentially one race, but people do self-divide, and I guess the question that I have is are you envisioning this as a process that goes on while the person is present? The subject, shall we say, is present, or is this something that the officer fills in after the fact? So in other words, we have the question of how do they self-identify versus is someone available? Is that part of the thinking, or how does that fit into there?
Those are all the issues that we'll have to discuss in the next few months, and we'll be talking about that.
Okay, so no real no real plan at the moment that you're building from, or something like that? Do you have is there a prototype that's been introduced or suggested that you're looking at as a model?
The prototype that's been suggested is the recommendation from LECC and Department of Justice, which the committee has access to. The focus of the committee at this point is not what you just described, is precisely to pick the data set, the data points. And then, as the chief mentioned earlier, by the early part of January, late December, we have to provide that information to the vendor.
Right.
And then from that point on, we continue our discussion to talk about all the things that you brought up, to essentially build the system, build our expectations on how we're going to implement the pilot project.
Yeah, because I guess things, the thing that we've sort of looked at a little bit is what people consider race, Caucasian, Hispanic, et cetera. And I guess a lot of the problem is how one group of people would identify, an individual versus how the individual identifies themselves.
You're absolutely right. And there's a lot of literature out there and pros and cons about is it the officer's perception that we use, or is it do we rely on the person who's been detained on what they describe themselves as? And so we have to work through all of that.
Interesting set of problems. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a point of information.
Go ahead.
So the document that was included in our packet that explained what this item was, talked about what we're supposed to be doing is, other than policy review, what other functions can or should the police commission fill? It talks about the data points being done as a pilot project by that group. Aside from the policy, what do we want to see? And it seems like we're getting off track and we're at time, so.
Thank you. I am responsible for that, and I'm sorry I'm not guiding the conversation here the way it should be, so I will try to do that. We need to focus on the process, so let's move to that. I think we all understand the purpose, and that's been explained in our policy, so I got you in the queue, Jesse. So right now, let's talk about how we want to go about this. That's simple enough. I mean, we should be able to, we know we're already reviewing the policy, so that takes care of one. We know we're going to discuss and refine that policy and the scope of it and the purpose of it and the things that we need to do. But what should we be doing next month at our meeting? How should we be, what process should we have for next month? We want to request the administration, for instance, bring us information about what they plan to do. We're hearing that hasn't been decided yet. It may take several months to come through that, so I don't know exactly what the commission, I want your wishes. So please, let's focus on that. And Claire, you were next, and then one Carlos, and then Edward, and then Jesse.
Thanks, and thanks, Tamara, for the clarification, because I was feeling like we were getting off track. But I think it does speak to the challenge that this body will have if we're confused about what our role is in there, and these questions of, is it race, is it ethnicity, is it the officer's perception, is it actual demographic data of who's actually being stopped. One thing I want to say is, this has come up at this table before some years ago, and there was a real insistence from some folks, you have to record the actual demographics of the person you're stopping. And from my perspective, if you're trying to get at the issue of bias, you actually need to record the perception of the officer who's instigating the stop. You could still also record the actual demographic data of the person, but, not to pick on Captain Kamkar, but he might be stopped by someone who believes he's Latino, but he's not. So the fact that he's actually another ethnicity is irrelevant to the fact that he may be stopped out of some bias against how he's perceived. So I think as we think about what our role is, I do believe there's a role for going out to the community, but I think that would be better if there was some things already drafted for response to, so that people aren't getting too down into the weeds and not even being able to come up with something to work on. If I understand what the chief scoped out, there's going to be a pilot time period. Is that correct? A kind of a test run of sorts? Yes. So part of me feels like there may be a place to build in community outreach and feedback within that time frame. I think for our meeting on the 12th, I don't know when this other committee is meeting and what the schedule is there, but if we could get a report from them at our meeting on the 12th, I think that would be a really good foundation from which we could then talk about more deeply about the policies that we want to see associated with this program. And then, not to keep pitching the ACLU of Oregon, but Dave Fidenki, the executive director of the ACLU of Oregon, is one of the folks working on this, and he has a long history working on these types of data collection systems. He helped support the Corvallis Police Department in setting up theirs. So I do think we have some very competent people who are looking at the technical details in terms of how do you set up the database and what should it collect. And I don't think I think we should pay attention to that, but I don't think this body needs to focus on that. I think we need to be focusing on how does the policy intersect with the data collection. It's late, so I don't feel like I have any great things to offer in terms of next steps other than a report from the committee.
Thank you. And looking at the time, I know we're not going to get into any substantive agreement unless somebody wants to extend time for this purpose, but I think we're better off carrying it over till the next meeting. I have a question for information regarding Claire's request. Do you think you'll be meeting between now and December?
Yes, we have a meeting scheduled Monday.
So you would be able to report the progress at next month? Could we ask for that in part of our discussion?
Yes, we'll be glad.
Thank you. That's great. So we're into the commissioner comments time. If you would like to extend the time, I'll take a motion to continue this discussion, or if you'd like to go ahead and finish up with comments, and you're certainly welcome to make your comments regarding this topic and/or anything else. We can go on into the rest of the agenda and finish up our meeting. Seeing no motion, we'll move on to the next item, and I'll start with Juan Carlos because he was next in the queue. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am disappointed that we didn't have enough time, but it's towards the end of the night. I think it'll be important for us to really find a way to determine, identify what our role is going to be moving forward. This is only the beginning, folks. If you think about the TASER policy, this is going to be longer and more extensive, a lot of passion. I do want to let you know that the LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens, a new civil rights established chapter here in Oregon back in March the 20th. We also have an anti-racial profiling committee that you need to be aware of. And just briefly, Mr. Chairman, that what they believe in and the mission of that is they ask law enforcement and police departments to abstain from creating and implementing any databases that uses race and ethnicity as basis for police officers to single out, discriminate, or marginalize any group of people. The institutional data collection system is, as well as the summarization and the interpretation of this data by law enforcement, used in a way that does not reflect community definition of what's right, just, and reasonable, is detrimental to people of color and hinders the establishment and maintenance of trust. I'll be happy to provide that to all of you. I believe that the Police Commission should have some kind of public forum, some kind of listening sessions with NAACP, CALC, LULAC, of course, and some other groups, and then bring them back after a year or so and see how we progressed. Hopefully we can retake this conversation in the role itself, the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say it's exciting for me to, as our first topic being this racial profiling. I think that's great. And it will be, I think, a very long process with a lot of information. There's a lot of things that go into this. I think we all were invited to Captain Kamkar's training on the 20th, and I went through part of his training about a year ago, and I think it's a really good thing if everybody can make that. It's a very interesting piece.
Just wanted to clarify, it's, if I may, I don't want to call it training because it takes 8 hours to train our officers, so this is going to be an orientation of what it is that we talk about to our officers, condensed in about 3 hours or so. So it'll be a fast ride.
Okay, just want to wish everybody a happy Turkey Day.
It's coming around the corner.
Just in general, on a number of the topics we've discussed here today, I keep seeing the opportunity for the HRC and the Police Commission to be working together on some of these issues, and since that's my job here, I'm enthused that we have particularly this issue of bias-based both policies, how do we deal with the policy, how do we gather the data. I seem to have arrived at a really good time for, taking this back to the HRC, who I think is going to be excited to know what's being worked on here. And I think there's some opportunities here to partner in community outreach and gathering data and coming back and reviewing it in a year.
Well, final thoughts from me. I think that it's a good thing that we do have this conversation going on. I know that the chief is very interested to make sure that the EPD get it right, stuff, and everyone here at the table is also concerned that we get it right. But there is also the other piece, as I mentioned, about the community outreach. Those people that's not a part of the process is not, I wasn't inferring that we do it right away. Of course, you have to have some kind of guidelines, like you said, but I think that it's important that we also, as a police commission, give the public an opportunity to express their views and stuff and share that with that committee. So.
A lot of good comments tonight. Tough topic, and it's going to be a tough topic for, sounds like, for quite a while. So I guess we shouldn't expect things to really fly quickly, the way it sounds. Although it sounds like we kind of have some set deadlines because the chief needs it, and Captain Campcart needs our information back within a certain period of time, or it's not going to be effective at all. So we can't. I don't think we can let it stretch to as long as the taser stretch, because we're going to need to get that done before that time frame. So. I'm hoping we all keep that in mind too, that we can't sit on our hands and let this go too long, or we're going to be completely ineffective and have wasted our time. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
First of all, I wanted to thank everyone here. I'm learning so much from this commission, and the more I learn, the more confused I get. And I think that's really, really a good thing. Joe, I've learned so much. Juan Carlos, thank you. James, I mean, it's phenomenal, the amount of stuff I don't know. It's just, and I thank you for all sharing it. And welcome, Bill and Edward. I think it will be really exciting to have you on the board. Second thing is, and maybe I'm an optimist, but I think with the efficiency of this, or looking through the world through rose-colored glasses, yes, I will keep them on, that we will hammer this out in a very efficient fashion, and I do know that it will not please everyone, because if you try and do that, you'll go crazy. And third of all, I'm going to apologize for next month. I have a conflict of for Rotary. We have our Christmas party, and I'm instrumental in our Rotary Club, so I am going to be here, but I'm going to be leaving early, so I apologize a month in advance, and that should make it okay, right? Thank you.
Nothing to add.
So I just wanted to apologize for being late. I have a pretty flexible work schedule, but the second Thursday of the month is when my board of directors meet, which is my set of bosses, and it's the one meeting I cannot be flexible about. So I will be chronically late as long as they continue to meet at that time. So I just apologize about that. And then I wanted to just share that I applied to do a ride-along, hopefully in December, and looking forward to that when council's on break. And I also wanted to welcome Mr. Whalen to the commission. Very glad you're here, and thanks for stepping up to serve.
I think the discussion that we had today was a really good start on a topic that needs to be addressed, but the timeline's pretty tight on. I'm comfortable that we didn't complete this worksheet today, that we just decided what we might want to do in the next meeting, leaving the items open for January and February, because I think we're not going to know how far we get. I do think public outreach, like others have suggested, needs to be entered into at some point in here. I don't know what that would look like. It would be great if there's something jointly with the HRC that works out. So hopefully we'll have a chance to talk more about that in our December meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. Again, thank you everyone here for their commitment to serve and commitment to help us get these policies done. I know we are just only making an inroad tonight, and I realize that we just ran out of time. we ran a lot over on the policy itself, and that's a good thing because that helped us hammer our discussion for what we're going to do next. And we will continue to keep this on the agenda for as long as it takes. You know, the time frame was now December and January, but if we have to go to February, March, and April, then we'll keep it on until it's done. And everybody has gotten their say about it. So I assure you, we're not going to rush this. I know people seem to think there's an urgency, but it is not important to finish something. It's important to do it right. So we're going to do it right. Wow. Thank you very much.
Well, it is important.
Oh, yeah, let me, just a second, I want to write. Real quick here. So.
You know that you was the one that was in charge of it.
No, I want to.
Oh, I might
Yeah.
put those away.
I'll do it for you this time.
And I want to,
Freshman.
And is there usually space available during the
let me just, right?
I think so. I'm not worried to say.
Back and give us a big-
So what kind of color do you have?
Just remind me.
What year, what color?
Green. And I, 11 months on. We don't have that kind of commitment. Yeah. What? 11 months, we don't have that.